Hey there, and welcome to Crime for Sleep. I know you're having trouble falling asleep, so let me keep you company with true crime stories from around the world. Before we dive in, I'm curious, where did you first hear this one? If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Now get comfortable, and let's get into tonight's case. Crime 1, I moved here for peace. A small patch of land, some silence, no past attached, or so I thought. While digging near the fence to plant sunflowers, my shovel hit something hard. It wasn't a rock, it was a jar, a mason jar sealed tight. Inside were teeth, real ones, molars, canines, all stained and cracked. I tried to convince myself they were animal until I noticed one had a silver filling. I never told anyone, but the next morning someone left a fresh jar on my porch. This one was empty, just a note inside that read, "Keep digging." The weight of that empty jar felt heavier than the first one. I held it against the morning light, watching dust particles dance inside the glass. My hands wouldn't stop trembling. Someone knew I had found something. Someone was watching. I started avoiding the garden completely. The sunflower seeds remained in their packet on my kitchen counter, mocking me every time I made coffee. But the silence in the house had changed. It wasn't peaceful anymore. It was waiting. The neighbor across the street had lived here for decades. She watched me from her window, always holding that same faded curtain. When I finally worked up the courage to knock on her door, she answered before I could even raise my hand. "You found them," she said simply, not a question, a statement. Her living room smelled like dust and old photographs. She poured tea with shaking hands, the china rattling against the saucer. "The previous owner," she began, then stopped, her eyes focused on something beyond my shoulder. "He was a quiet man, kept to himself. People said he was a collector." "A collector of what?" She stirred her tea in perfect circles, the spoon clinking against the porcelain. Things that didn't belong to him. The tea grew cold between us. She told me about the disappearances. People passing through town who never made it to their destinations. Hitchhikers mostly, young people looking for work, the kind of people whose absence might go unnoticed for a while. "But the police investigated," I said, though even as I spoke, I knew the answer. "They found nothing, no evidence, no bodies." She set down her cup with deliberate care. "Just stories, rumors, and then he died and the stories stopped." I walked home through streets that seemed narrower than before. The houses pressed closer together, their windows dark and knowing. My property felt different now, contaminated by possibility. Every shadow might be hiding something. Every soft spot in the earth might give way under my feet. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the silver filling. Someone had cared enough about their teeth to get dental work. Someone had smiled, eaten meals, bitten into apples. Someone had been reduced to fragments in a jar. The next morning brought rain. I watched it from my kitchen window, drumming against the glass in patterns that seemed almost like code. The empty jar sat on my counter where I'd left it, still holding that slip of paper. "Keep digging." I found myself walking toward the garden despite the rain. The soil was soft now, easy to work with. My hands moved without conscious thought, pulling up weeds, moving stones, looking for the spots where the earth seemed different, less settled. The second jar was buried deeper. This one contained something else along with the teeth. A small silver locket, tarnished black. Inside was a photograph of a young woman with kind eyes and a nervous smile. On the back, someone had written a single word in fading ink: "Sorry." I held that locket for a long time, feeling its weight against my palm. The rain soaked through my clothes, but I couldn't move. This wasn't just about teeth anymore. This was about someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's friend. someone who had trusted the wrong person. The woman in the photograph looked familiar, though I couldn't place where I might have seen her face. That nagging recognition followed me back into the house, where I spread old newspapers across my kitchen table, missing persons reports from years past, grainy photographs of people who had simply vanished. There she was, third page, small headline, a student traveling cross-country who never arrived at her destination, last seen at a gas station just outside town. The photograph in the newspaper was clearer than the one in the locket, but it was definitely the same person. I called the police. The officer who answered sounded bored until I mentioned the address. Then his voice changed. "We'll send someone out," he said, but there was something in his tone that made me doubt it. No one came. I spent the following days in a strange suspension. I couldn't eat properly. Food tasted like nothing. I kept returning to the garden, drawn by a compulsion I couldn't name. The soil seemed to call to me, whispering promises of more secrets buried just beneath the surface. On the fourth day, I found the third jar. This one was different, heavier. Inside, along with more teeth, was a small digital camera, the kind people used before phones took over everything. The battery was dead, but I found a charger in my junk drawer that fit. The camera held 47 photographs. Most were landscapes, ordinary scenes of travel, but the last 5 were different. They showed the inside of what looked like a basement, stone walls, a workbench, tools arranged with obsessive precision. And in the corner, barely visible in the shadows, were more jars, dozens of them. I recognized the basement immediately. It was under my house. The entrance was hidden behind a false wall in the furnace room. I'd never noticed it before, but now I could see the hairline crack where the newer drywall met the old. The smell that drifted out when I finally pried it open was indescribable. Not decay exactly, something else, something that had been waiting. The basement was exactly as it appeared in the photographs. The workbench, the tools, the jars, row upon row of them, each labeled with a date and a single initial. The collection spanned decades. I should have called the police again. I should have run. Instead, I found myself studying the labels, trying to match them to the missing persons reports I'd collected. The dates aligned perfectly. The initials fit. This was a catalog of lives ended, reduced to specimens in glass containers. But there was something else, something that made my blood freeze. The last jar on the shelf was different from the others. It was new, clean, and it was labeled with tomorrow's date and my first initial. I heard footsteps upstairs. The neighbor woman stood in my kitchen when I emerged from the basement, holding a fresh jar. This one wasn't empty. I could see teeth inside, along with something else. A small piece of paper with my name written on it. "He trained me well," she said quietly. "Before he died, someone had to continue the work." Her hands were steady now, no trembling, no nervous energy, just calm certainty. "The police won't come," she continued. "They never do, not for this address, not anymore." I understood then, the investigating officer's change of tone, the lack of follow-up, the way the previous disappearances had been handled with such casual indifference. This wasn't just about one collector. This was about a system that had learned to look the other way. "Why?" I asked. She smiled, and for the first time I saw something genuinely warm in her expression. Because some people matter less than others, because some people won't be missed, because the work is important, even if no one else understands it. The jar in her hands caught the light from my kitchen window. The teeth inside rattled softly, like bones in a wind chime. I'm writing this now because I need someone to know. The jars are still in the basement. The collection continues to grow. And I've learned that keeping quiet is the only way to survive in a place where the truth is buried as deep as the evidence. The sunflower seeds are still on my counter. I'll never plant them now. But sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I can hear something growing in the garden anyway. Something that doesn't need sunlight to thrive. The neighbor watches me from her window. I watch her back. We both know what we're protecting. We both know what we're hiding. And somewhere in this town, someone else is digging. Someone else is finding things they shouldn't. Someone else is learning that some secrets are too dangerous to share. The work continues. It always does. Crime 2, I was cleaning out soot and ash when I noticed a hollow sound behind the bricks. I pried them loose and found a narrow door. The space was tight and dusty, filled with old furniture, yellowed newspapers, and dozens of Polaroids scattered across the floor. In each photo, someone was tied to a chair, gagged, bruised, terrified. The same room showed up in all the pictures, and I recognized it. It was right under my feet. I followed the trail of photos deeper into the space, but the last one wasn't old. It showed me asleep in my bed, taken from above. The metallic taste of fear filled my mouth as I held that photograph. My hands trembled against the glossy surface, leaving fingerprints on what might have been evidence. The image was sharp, recent, taken with a digital camera rather than the old Polaroid film scattered around me. Someone had been in my bedroom while I slept, standing close enough to capture the peaceful expression on my face. I crawled back toward the narrow opening, clutching the photograph and several others. The musty air clung to my clothes, carrying the scent of something I couldn't identify, sweet and chemical, like cleaning products mixed with something organic. My knees scraped against the rough wooden floor as I gathered what I could, stuffing photos into my pockets before squeezing back through the hidden door. The living room felt different now, exposed. Every shadow seemed to hide another secret. Every creak of the house suggested movement where there should be none. I spread the photographs across my coffee table, organizing them by what appeared to be chronological order. The Polaroids were faded, their edges curled with age, but the subjects were always the same, people bound and gagged in that underground room. I studied each face, searching for recognition, for some connection to my own life. The victims appeared to be different ages, different backgrounds, but all shared the same expression of terror. The room itself never changed, the same wooden chair, the same concrete walls, the same single bulb hanging from the ceiling. I had walked above this space every day for 2 years, cooking meals, watching television, sleeping soundly while this chamber existed beneath my feet. The newspapers provided more clues. I unfolded them carefully, their yellow pages crackling between my fingers. Headlines screamed about missing persons, unsolved disappearances, families left without answers. I cross-referenced the dates with the photographs, looking for patterns, for connections that might explain what I had discovered. One article caught my attention. A woman had vanished while walking home from work, leaving behind only her purse and keys. The description matched one of the faces in the photographs, the same dark hair, the same angular jawline, the same small scar above the left eyebrow that was visible even in the grainy Polaroid. I read the article twice, memorizing details, searching for any mention of this house, this neighborhood, anything that might connect her disappearance to my basement. The phone rang, startling me from my investigation. I let it ring 4 times before answering, my voice barely above a whisper. The caller was my neighbor, asking about the noise she had heard earlier, scraping sounds, she said, like furniture being moved. I told her I was doing some cleaning, rearranging things, nothing to worry about. She accepted the explanation, but I could hear suspicion in her voice. After hanging up, I realized I needed to be more careful. If neighbors had heard me breaking through the brick wall, others might have noticed unusual activity around the house. I returned to the photographs, studying them with new urgency. The digital photo of me sleeping remained the most disturbing, not just because of the violation, but because of what it suggested about timing and access. I examined the angle of the shot, the way the light fell across my face, the position of my bedroom furniture visible in the frame. The photographer had been standing near the window, close enough to capture fine details but far enough away to include context. This wasn't a random break-in or a moment of opportunity. Someone had planned this carefully, had studied my habits, had waited for the right moment. The basement door was in the kitchen, behind a cabinet I rarely moved. I pushed it aside and descended the wooden steps, my phone's flashlight illuminating the familiar storage space. But now I looked with different eyes, searching for signs of recent disturbance, for evidence that someone had been using this space as more than just storage. In the corner behind old paint cans and holiday decorations, I found something that made my blood run cold. A small video camera still recording, its red light blinking steadily in the darkness. The device was new, expensive, positioned to capture anyone who entered the basement. I stopped recording and removed the memory card, my hands shaking as I realized someone had been watching me long before I discovered the hidden room. Back upstairs, I inserted the memory card into my laptop. The files were organized by date, stretching back months. I watched myself carrying laundry to the basement, searching for tools, moving boxes from one corner to another. Ordinary activities, but captured without my knowledge, studied by someone who remained invisible. The final video was different. It showed someone else in the basement, a figure in dark clothing moving deliberately through the space. I watched as they approached the cabinet, moved it aside, and opened the basement door. But the angle was wrong, the lighting too dim to make out their face. What I could see was their familiarity with the space, the way they moved without hesitation, without the caution of someone breaking in. I paused the video and leaned closer to the screen. The figure was wearing gloves, but something about their movements seemed familiar. The way they tilted their head when listening, the particular rhythm of their footsteps, the careful way they replaced everything exactly as they had found it. These weren't the actions of a stranger. They were the movements of someone who belonged here, someone who knew this house as well as I did. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I scrolled through the videos again, this time focusing not on the mysterious figure, but on the dates, the patterns, the timing of each recording. The surveillance had begun shortly after I moved in, but the hidden room had existed much longer. The Polaroids suggested years of activity, possibly decades, while the digital equipment indicated recent upgrades to an ongoing operation. I picked up the photograph of myself again, studying not just the image but the implications. Someone had access to my house, to my bedroom, to my life. They had been watching me sleep, documenting my routines, planning something that required this level of surveillance. The victims in the other photographs might have gone through this same process, the watching, the documenting, the careful preparation before whatever happened in that underground room. The house suddenly felt like a trap, every door and window a potential entrance for someone who had been moving through my life like a ghost. I gathered the photographs and the memory card, stuffing them into a bag along with some clothes and essentials. I needed to leave, to think clearly away from this place, to decide what to do with what I had discovered. As I headed toward the door, I noticed something that stopped me cold. The cabinet in the kitchen had been moved back into position, perfectly aligned with the scratches on the floor that marked its usual spot. I hadn't moved it back. I had left it pushed aside when I went to investigate the camera, but now it was exactly where it belonged. Someone had been in the house while I was upstairs, had replaced the cabinet, had possibly seen me discover their surveillance system. They might still be here, watching from the shadows, waiting to see what I would do with my terrible knowledge. The photographs in my bag felt like evidence, like proof of crimes that might still be ongoing, but they also felt like a death sentence. I left through the front door, not looking back, not checking to see if anyone was following. The weight of what I had found pressed against my chest like a physical force, making it hard to breathe. I had stumbled into something much larger than a simple break-in or vandalism. I had discovered a system, a pattern, a carefully constructed operation that had been using my house as its center. The question that haunted me as I drove away wasn't just who was responsible, but how long they had been planning to make me their next victim. The photograph of me sleeping suggested I had moved beyond surveillance into active preparation. I was no longer just the unwitting landlord of a torture chamber. I was becoming its next occupant. Crime 3, the smell was unbearable. I thought maybe an animal had crawled in and died, but curiosity got the better of me. I lifted the lid, gagged, and froze. A plastic bag sat on top of the trash, barely sealed. Inside, a human finger, pale, cleanly severed. I backed away and ran inside. I wanted to call someone, but fear clawed at my throat. That night, I heard dragging outside. When I looked out, the trash can was gone. In its place was a small package on my doorstep. Inside it, a note that simply read, "Wrong can." Sleep became impossible. I kept replaying the image of that finger, so white it almost looked artificial. But the smell told a different story. The metallic tang of blood mixed with something else, something sweet and rotting. I knew what I had seen was real. The next morning, I walked past my neighbor's house. The elderly woman who lived there was watering her garden, humming softly. She looked up and smiled, the same warm smile she had given me for years. Her hands were clean, carefully manicured. No bandages, no missing fingers. I found myself staring at her hands longer than I should have. "Beautiful morning, isn't it?" she said, her voice carrying that familiar rasp from decades of smoking. I nodded, unable to speak. As I turned to leave, I noticed something glinting in her flower bed, a small piece of metal, partially buried beneath the roses. It looked like a surgical instrument, but I couldn't be sure from where I stood. Days passed. I started paying attention to things I had never noticed before. The way she always wore long sleeves, even in the heat. How she never seemed to have visitors, yet I occasionally heard voices coming from her house. The fact that she always took her trash out after dark, something I had dismissed as eccentricity. I began checking my mailbox more frequently, hoping to catch her outside. One evening, I saw her struggling with several heavy bags. She looked around nervously before dragging them to the curb. Her movements were deliberate, calculated. When she turned back toward her house, I noticed she was limping slightly. The postal worker mentioned that she had been receiving packages almost daily. Medical supplies, according to the return addresses. When I asked casually about her health, he shrugged and said she claimed to be caring for a sick relative, but I had never seen anyone else at that house. I started keeping a journal documenting every strange occurrence. The sounds that came from her basement, always muffled but distinctly rhythmic. The way she would disappear for days at a time, leaving her house completely dark. The delivery trucks that arrived when she wasn't home, drivers who seemed to know exactly where to leave their packages. One night I heard the dragging sound again. This time I was prepared. I watched from my window as she moved something wrapped in plastic from her back door to her car. The shape was unmistakably human. My hands shook as I reached for my phone, but something stopped me. What if I was wrong? What if there was an innocent explanation? The next morning I found another note on my doorstep. This one was longer. Some people see too much. Some people ask too many questions. Some people should mind their own business. The handwriting was shaky, almost childlike. I decided to investigate while she was away. Her spare key was hidden under the same garden gnome where it had always been. The house smelled like disinfectant and something else I couldn't identify. Everything appeared normal until I reached the basement. The smell hit me first, not the rotting smell from the trash can, but something clinical, like a hospital. The basement was set up like a makeshift medical facility. Tables, instruments, supplies, and photographs, dozens of them pinned to a cork board. People I didn't recognize, but they all shared something in common. They were all missing fingers. I heard footsteps upstairs. She was back. I had to leave, but as I turned toward the stairs, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. A jar on the shelf, filled with what looked like preserved fingers, and at the bottom of the jar, a small label with a date from the previous week. I made it out of the house just as she entered through the front door. She didn't see me, but I could hear her moving around, checking things. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about those photographs. Were those people still alive? Were they victims or something else entirely? The police wouldn't believe me without concrete evidence. And what evidence did I really have? A finger in a trash can that had disappeared. Notes that could have been pranks. Photographs that might have been fake. Medical supplies that could have been for legitimate purposes. I started researching missing persons cases, looking for patterns. What I found disturbed me more than I expected. Several people had disappeared from the surrounding area over the past few years. All of them had been reported as runaways or voluntary disappearances. All of them had been people that society had forgotten, people whose absence wouldn't be questioned too closely. But the most disturbing discovery was a newspaper clipping I found in the library archives. A story about a retired nurse who had been accused of stealing medication from her patients. The charges had been dropped due to lack of evidence, but the article included a photograph. It was her, my neighbor. I confronted her the next day, showing her the article. She looked at it calmly, almost with amusement. People make mistakes, she said. People see things that aren't there. People create stories to make sense of things they don't understand. Her words stayed with me. Was I creating a story? Had I seen what I thought I had seen? The finger in the trash can seem like a lifetime ago, almost like a dream. But the notes were real. The basement was real. The photographs were real. Or were they? I started questioning everything. My memory of that night, the smell, the finger itself. Had I been so desperate for excitement in my mundane life that I had imagined the whole thing? The human mind is capable of extraordinary self-deception. But then I received one final note. This one was different. It wasn't a warning or a threat. It was an invitation. Come to the basement tonight. See the truth for yourself. I knew I should call the police. I knew I should tell someone where I was going. But I also knew that I needed to see this through. I needed to know if I was losing my mind or if something truly sinister was happening next door. As I write this, I can see her house from my window. The basement light is on. She's waiting for me. In a few minutes, I'll walk over there and finally learn the truth, but I'm afraid of what I might discover. Not about her, but about myself. About how far I've been willing to go to convince myself that something extraordinary was happening in my ordinary life. The finger in the trash can started this, but I'm beginning to wonder if I was the one who put it there. Crime 4, I don't have a child, never did, so when the monitor started picking up static, I figured it was a neighbor's signal bleeding over. Then the crying started, high-pitched, rhythmic, almost mechanical. I turned it off, but it turned back on. The voice changed, low, guttural, whispering words I couldn't quite catch. One night I listened closely and heard my own name, repeated over and over, slower each time. Then a new word, come. I unplugged it, smashed it. But the next morning it was back on the shelf, fully intact, glowing red. That's when I knew I had to investigate. The monitor belonged to my former roommate, who moved out abruptly after living here for 6 months. She left behind more than just the baby equipment, a stack of unpaid bills, a lingering smell of cigarettes mixed with something sweet and cloying, and a nervous energy that seemed to seep into the walls themselves. I started going through her things more carefully. In a shoebox tucked behind winter coats, I found photographs of children I didn't recognize. Not family photos, these were taken from a distance through windows across playgrounds. The children looked unaware, caught in moments of pure innocence that felt violated by the lens capturing them. My hands trembled as I flipped through them. Some had notes scrawled on the back in her handwriting. Tuesday afternoons, walks alone, parents work late. The sweet smell I'd noticed grew stronger as I handled the photos, and I realized it was coming from them, a perfume that made my stomach turn. I called the landlord. He hesitated when I mentioned her name, then admitted she'd been evicted from her previous apartment. Something about complaints from neighbors, children going missing from the area. He hadn't done a proper background check, just needed someone to split the rent. The police were polite but dismissive when I brought them the photos. Without a specific crime or missing child report, they couldn't do much. But they took my statement, and I watched the officer's expression change as he examined the images. He asked if I knew where she'd gone. I didn't, but the monitor kept broadcasting. I began recording the transmissions, playing them back at different speeds. Beneath the static and the crying, I could make out fragments of conversation. A woman's voice, hers, coaxing someone to come closer. "Don't be afraid," she whispered. "I have something to show you." Then I heard children's voices responding. Different children, different conversations, but always the same patient, predatory tone from her. The recording spanned months, maybe longer. I realized the monitor wasn't just receiving signals, it was an archive of her activities. The breakthrough came when I found her journal, wedged between the mattress and box spring. Pages of meticulous planning, addresses, schedules, detailed observations about families in the neighborhood. She'd been watching for months before she ever moved in with me, using my apartment as a base of operations. But the final entry stopped me cold. It was dated the day before she disappeared. He's starting to suspect. Found him going through my things. Need to relocate before he connects the dots. The beauty of this work is that no one ever believes the truth until it's too late. I'd been living with her for 6 months, eating meals together, sharing casual conversations about work and weather, while she used my home to plan whatever she was planning. The monitor had been her way of staying connected to her network, her way of maintaining contact with accomplices or victims I couldn't identify. The recording stopped abruptly after that entry, but sometimes late at night I still hear static from the empty shelf where the monitor used to sit. The police found no evidence of actual crimes, no missing children in our immediate area, no concrete proof of anything beyond disturbing photographs and strange recordings. She'd been careful, professional, and she'd vanished completely, leaving behind only questions and the lingering scent of that sweet perfume that still clings to certain corners of my apartment. I've moved since then, but I keep the recordings. Evidence of something that might have been prevented if I'd been more observant, more suspicious of someone who seemed so ordinary. The children's voices haunt me, not because I know what happened to them, but because I don't. Sometimes I wonder if she's still out there, finding new roommates, new bases of operation, setting up monitors in other people's homes, creating new archives of surveillance and manipulation. The thought keeps me awake, listening for static that might not be there, for voices that might belong to children I'll never be able to help. The truth is, I may have been living with a predator for 6 months, sharing my space with someone who collected children's voices like trophies. But I'll never know for certain. The evidence disappeared with her, leaving only recordings of conversations I can't fully understand and photographs of children whose names I'll never learn. Justice in this case exists only in the possibility that somewhere, someone else is listening to their own monitor, asking the same questions I asked, and maybe, just maybe, acting on their suspicions before it's too late. Crime 5, it was supposed to be a hiking trip, solitude, fresh air, and a camera. I took a photo of myself near the edge of the trail. Later, I checked the screen. Someone stood behind me, same clothes, same build, same face. I turned around, but the trail was empty. Hours later, I blacked out. When I woke up, I was underground, dirt in my mouth, breathing shallow. Clawing to the surface, I broke through to find myself looking into the same face that buried me, smiling, calm, and walking away with my backpack. That was 3 months ago. The police report sits on my kitchen table, still open to page 4. Officer Johnson wrote down everything I said, but I could see the doubt in his eyes. Who would believe a story like that? Even I struggled to accept what happened. The photograph is my only proof. I've stared at it for hours, magnifying every pixel on my phone screen. The figure behind me is partially obscured by shadows, but the resemblance is undeniable. Same jawline, same posture, same hiking boots I bought 2 weeks before the trip. The timestamp shows it was taken just before my world changed forever. I've been retracing my steps, trying to understand. The trail was remote, known only to locals and serious hikers. I'd chosen it specifically for its isolation. No crowds, no distractions, just me and the wilderness. But someone else knew about that place. Someone who had been watching me long enough to know my habits, my clothing, my exact route. The hospital records confirm the physical evidence. Dirt under my fingernails, scratches on my arms, soil in my hair that didn't match anything from the surface where I emerged. The doctor said I'd been unconscious for several hours, possibly from some kind of drug, but blood tests came back clean. No trace of sedatives or chemicals, just elevated stress hormones and dehydration. I've started carrying a small recorder everywhere, speaking my thoughts aloud, documenting every detail I remember, the taste of earth in my mouth, the sound of my own breathing echoing in that confined space, the feeling of panic as I realized I was trapped, but also something else, a strange familiarity, as if I'd been in that exact position before. My sister visited last week. She brought coffee and concern, sitting across from me in the same chair where I now spend most of my days. She asked about therapy, about moving somewhere new, about getting help. But she also asked something that's been haunting me since she left. She asked if I was sure about what I saw when I broke through the surface. Her question sent me back to that moment, the rush of fresh air, the relief of escape. And then looking up to see that face, my face staring down at me. But memory is fragile, especially traumatic memory. Was the person really there, or was it my mind desperate to make sense of an impossible situation? I've been visiting the area again, always during daylight, always with my phone fully charged. The spot where I emerged is still visible, a small depression in the earth surrounded by disturbed soil. I've dug there myself looking for answers. What I found was a space just large enough for a human body, lined with plastic sheeting. Someone had prepared this in advance. The local library has old newspaper archives. I've been reading them, searching for similar cases. Missing persons reports from the area, unexplained disappearances. What I found was a pattern stretching back years. People who went hiking alone and never returned, or people who returned changed, claiming experiences that no one believed. One case caught my attention. A woman who reported being buried alive by someone who looked exactly like her. The police dismissed it as a psychological break. She moved away shortly after. I tried to find her, but the trail goes cold after she left town. It's as if she simply vanished. My neighbor mentioned something strange last week. She said she'd seen me leaving the house on a day when I was actually inside, recovering from another sleepless night. She said I looked different somehow. Calmer, more confident. She waved, but I didn't wave back. I just kept walking toward the woods. I've been checking my belongings obsessively. My hiking boots are muddy, but I haven't been hiking since that day. My backpack, the one I thought was taken, sits in my closet, contents slightly rearranged. Items I don't remember purchasing. A small shovel, plastic sheeting. A bottle of water that tastes wrong. The photograph on my phone has changed, or maybe I'm noticing details I missed before. The figure in the background is clearer now, almost as if it's stepping forward. The smile is more pronounced. The eyes are looking directly at the camera, directly at me, but that's impossible. I've had the same phone, the same photo since that day. I've started leaving the house at different times, taking different routes, but I always end up at the same place, that trail, that spot where my life divided into before and after. Sometimes I find footprints that match my boots. Sometimes I find evidence that someone has been digging. The recording device I carry has been acting strangely. It captures conversations I don't remember having. My voice, but saying things I would never say, planning things I would never plan. The timestamp shows recordings made when I was asleep, when the device was supposedly turned off. Last night I dreamed I was still underground, but in the dream I was the one putting someone else in that dark space. The person looked up at me with terror in their eyes, my eyes, and begged me to stop. I woke up with dirt under my fingernails again. The police officer called yesterday. He said they'd found something at the site, more evidence of digging, fresh disturbances. But when I asked if they'd found anything else, anything that might explain what happened to me, he went quiet. He asked if I'd been back there, if I'd been digging myself. I told him no, but the lie tasted like earth in my mouth. Because I can't remember everything anymore. There are gaps in my memory, hours that slip away like water through my fingers. I'll find myself places I don't remember going, holding things I don't remember picking up. The mirror in my bathroom has been showing me things that don't make sense. Sometimes my reflection moves a fraction of a second too late. Sometimes it smiles when I'm not smiling. Sometimes it's wearing clothes I don't own, carrying tools I've never seen. I've been thinking about that moment when I broke through the surface, the face looking down at me. What if it wasn't someone who looked like me? What if it was me looking down at someone else? What if the person who was buried was the one who dug their way out? What if I'm not who I think I am? The photograph is still on my phone, but now when I look at it, I'm not sure which figure is which. The person taking the photo or the person in the background, the victim or the perpetrator, the one who was buried or the one who did the burying. I've been preparing for another trip to the woods. This time I'm bringing a shovel. Crime 6, I didn't hear the hammering, just opened the door to get the mail and found it nailed there, delicate fabric torn at the hem, soaked in deep red. No note, no footprints, just the dress and a single nail through the chest. I brought it inside, hesitant. There was something in the pocket, a charm, small, rusted, shaped like a heart. I'd seen it before, in a dream I couldn't explain. That night I heard someone humming, the same tune that used to calm me as a child, but I live alone. And I never told anyone about that song. The dress smelled of lavender and something else, something metallic that made my throat tighten. I spread it across my kitchen table, careful not to let the stain touch the wood. The fabric was old, worn thin in places, hand-sewn buttons, the kind my grandmother used to make, but my grandmother had been dead for over a decade. I photographed everything, the dress, the charm, the nail hole, called the police, but they said without a clear threat there wasn't much they could do, just file a report, keep the evidence, stay vigilant. Their words felt hollow, scripted, like they'd said them 1,000 times before. The charm bothered me most. I held it up to the light, watching it catch the afternoon sun. The metal was warm, almost alive in my palm. There was an inscription on the back, so faded I had to squint to read it. Forever yours. The words sent a chill down my spine. I'd heard them before, whispered in that same humming voice that had followed me into sleep. I started asking questions, neighbors first. The woman next door with a nervous laugh said she'd seen someone walking around my yard late at night, tall figure moving slowly. But when pressed for details, she became vague. Maybe it was just shadows. Maybe her eyes were playing tricks. She touched her throat when she spoke, a gesture I'd noticed before in people who weren't telling the complete truth. The old man across the street was more direct. He'd seen a car parked outside my house for several nights. Dark sedan, engine running, but he couldn't remember the license plate, couldn't even be sure about the color. His certainty dissolved the moment I asked for specifics, leaving only the impression of someone watching. I drove to the local thrift stores, hoping to trace the dress. The third shop I visited had a familiar smell, that same lavender scent that clung to the fabric. The owner, a woman with silver hair and careful hands, examined the photographs I'd brought. She recognized the dress immediately. It had been donated just a few weeks ago by a quiet woman who'd seemed in a hurry to leave. The description she gave me was unsettling. Medium height, brown hair, nervous energy. She'd brought in several items, all vintage clothing, all seeming to carry stories the owner couldn't quite place. The woman had paid in cash, declined a receipt, and left without giving a name. But she'd lingered by the jewelry case, staring at the heart-shaped charms with an intensity that made the shop owner uncomfortable. I asked to see the security footage, but the cameras had been broken for months. Another dead end, another question without an answer. At home, I found myself humming that tune again. The melody came naturally, as if it had always been there, waiting. I realized I'd been humming it since childhood during moments of stress or solitude, but I'd never known where it came from, never connected it to anything specific. I called my aunt, the only family member who might remember my early years. She lived several states away, but her voice was clear when she answered. I hummed the melody for her, and the silence that followed was long and heavy. She knew the song. It had been my mother's lullaby, the one she'd sung when I was very small, before the accident, before everything changed. My aunt's voice grew careful, measured. She'd never mentioned this song before because she thought I wouldn't remember. I'd been so young when my mother died. But there was something else, something she'd never told me. My mother had a favorite dress, a vintage piece she'd found at an estate sale. She'd worn it the day she died, and they'd never found it after the crash. The authorities had assumed it had been destroyed or lost in the confusion. The description matched perfectly, down to the hand-sewn buttons and the way the fabric felt thin in certain places. My aunt's voice shook as she spoke. She'd kept some of my mother's jewelry, including a heart-shaped charm with "Forever Yours" inscribed on the back, a gift from my father on their first anniversary. I asked her to check if the charm was still there. The silence stretched long enough that I knew the answer before she spoke. The jewelry box was empty, had been for weeks, maybe months. She'd assumed she'd misplaced it during her recent move. The pieces were falling into place, but the picture they formed made no sense. Someone had my mother's dress, her charm, knew her lullaby. Someone who'd been watching my house, who'd chosen to leave these items nailed to my door like a message I couldn't decode. I spent the rest of the evening going through old photographs, looking for clues I might have missed. In one picture, taken just before the accident, my mother wore the dress. She was holding me, and I was reaching for something just out of frame. The image was slightly blurred, but I could make out another figure in the background, someone I didn't recognize. The next morning, I found fresh footprints in the soft earth beside my kitchen window. Small, deliberate steps. Someone had been standing there looking in. I followed the trail to the edge of my property, where it disappeared into the street. Inside, I noticed something I'd missed before. The nail that had held the dress to my door was still on my kitchen counter, but it wasn't just any nail. It was old, square-cut, the kind used in construction decades ago, the kind they'd used to build my childhood home. I drove to the cemetery where my mother was buried. I hadn't been there in years, but I found her grave easily. The headstone was clean, recently tended. Fresh flowers lay beside it, still damp with dew. Lavender, the same scent that clung to the dress. A groundskeeper was working nearby, and I asked him about the flowers. He'd seen the woman who brought them, came every few weeks, always alone, always left the same flowers. He'd tried to talk to her once, but she'd seemed startled, almost afraid. She'd never given her name. His description matched the woman from the thrift store. Medium height, brown hair, nervous energy. But there was one detail he added that made my blood run cold. She'd been humming while she tended the grave, the same tune I'd been carrying in my head for years. I sat beside my mother's grave until the sun began to set, trying to make sense of what I'd learned. Someone was out there, someone who knew things about my mother that I'd never known. Someone who had access to items that should have been lost forever. The drive home felt longer than usual. Every shadow seemed to hold possibilities I didn't want to consider. Every reflection in my mirrors could have been someone following. By the time I reached my driveway, my hands were shaking. The house was exactly as I'd left it, but something felt different, a presence I couldn't name. I checked every room, every window, every door. Nothing was out of place, but the feeling persisted. That night I dreamed of my mother. She was wearing the dress, humming that familiar tune, but her face was different, older, marked by years I'd never seen her live. She was trying to tell me something, but I couldn't understand the words. When I woke, I was humming the melody again. The charm was warm in my hand, though I didn't remember picking it up. In the morning light, I noticed something I'd missed before. The metal wasn't just rusted, it was stained, the same deep red that had soaked the dress. I realized then that I might never know the complete truth. The woman who'd been watching, who'd left these pieces of my mother's life on my doorstep, might be anyone. Someone who'd known my mother. Someone who'd been there when she died. Someone who'd been carrying secrets for all these years. Or perhaps someone who'd been carrying guilt. The dress still lies on my kitchen table, and the charm rests beside it. Sometimes, in the quiet hours before dawn, I hear that humming again, but I'm no longer certain it's coming from outside, and I'm no longer certain I want to know who's been watching. Because the more I learn, the more I realize that some truths are too heavy to carry alone, and some secrets are meant to stay buried with the dead. Crime 7, the pipes groaned before the water changed, thick, dark, almost oily. I reached out to turn the faucet, but before I could, it screamed. Not a mechanical screech, a scream, human, painful. It came from the drain, echoing up through the tiles. I backed away, slipped, and hit the floor. When I opened my eyes, the mirror was fogged. 5 handprints were on the glass, too small to be mine, too many to explain. I haven't turned the water back on since, but now the sink faucet drips. And sometimes I hear whispering behind the gurgle. That was 3 months ago. The building maintenance crew came twice, found nothing wrong with the plumbing. They said the water ran clear, pressure was fine, but they didn't stay long enough to hear what I heard. They didn't see what I saw. I started asking questions. The woman in the apartment below mine moved out suddenly, left her furniture, her clothes, everything. The landlord said she broke her lease without explanation. When I pressed him for details, his hands shook as he sorted through his keys. He mentioned something about complaints, about sounds coming from the walls, water damage in her ceiling that couldn't be explained. The building records were harder to access than they should have been. I had to visit the city office multiple times, each clerk telling me different stories about what documents were available. Finally, a tired-looking clerk with coffee stains on her shirt handed me a thin folder. The apartment above mine had been vacant for 2 years before I moved in. The previous tenant was a young mother with 2 children. The lease ended abruptly. I found her name in the local newspaper archives, a brief mention in the community section about a missing person report. No follow-up articles, no resolution, just her name, her age, and the fact that she was last seen leaving her apartment with her children. The police report was sealed, but the desk sergeant remembered the case. He kept glancing at his computer screen while we talked, as if he were reading something he wasn't supposed to share. The children were found safe with relatives across the country. The mother never was. The case went cold after 6 months. No signs of struggle, no evidence of foul play. She had simply vanished, leaving behind only the memory of neighbors who remembered hearing arguments through the walls, not shouting but whispered conversations that seemed to go on for hours. I started documenting everything. The sounds, the water, the patterns. The black water only appeared when I was alone. Never when maintenance was there, never when I had visitors, but it wasn't random. It came when I was tired, when my guard was down, when I was thinking about her. The woman who had lived above me, the woman who had disappeared. I interviewed the other tenants. Most were reluctant to talk, but eventually details emerged. The couple in the unit next to mine had called the police multiple times about domestic disturbances. Not from my apartment, but from the unit above. The sounds they described made my skin crawl, scraping, dragging, and always the sound of running water. The breakthrough came when I found the maintenance logs. The building super had kept detailed records of every repair, every complaint, every anomaly. Water damage in the ceiling below the vacant unit, pipes that needed replacing every few months. Bills for plumbing work that seemed excessive for a building this age. And then, buried in the records, a note that made my blood run cold. The previous tenant had complained about the water, black water, water that made sounds it shouldn't make. The super had documented every visit, every attempt to fix the problem. But the water always ran clear when he checked. The complaint stopped suddenly. The same week she disappeared. I confronted him about the logs. He was replacing a light fixture in the hallway, his hand steady despite his age. When I mentioned the water, he stopped working, put down his tools, looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. He told me about finding things in the pipes when he replaced them. Personal items, jewelry, pieces of clothing that didn't belong to any current tenant. He had given them to the police. The detective assigned to the missing person case had taken them as evidence, but the case file was sealed. The detective had retired. The items were logged and forgotten. The super had copies of the reports, though. He had kept everything just in case. The jewelry belonged to the missing woman. The detective's notes mentioned inconsistencies in her boyfriend's story. He had claimed to be out of town when she disappeared, but his credit card showed purchases at a local hardware store. Drain cleaner, lots of it, and a shovel. The detective had questioned him multiple times, but there wasn't enough evidence to make an arrest. I found the boyfriend's current address. He lived across town now in a house with a yard. I drove by several times before I worked up the courage to approach him. He was older than I expected, with calloused hands and paint under his fingernails. He worked construction, he said, always had. When I mentioned the building where I lived, his demeanor changed. The friendly smile faded, his hands clenched into fists. He claimed not to remember much about his former girlfriend, said they had broken up before she moved out, said he hadn't seen her in months when she disappeared. But when I mentioned the water, the black water, he went pale. Asked me why I was really there, asked me what I had heard. His voice dropped to a whisper when he told me some things were better left buried. I left his house with more questions than answers, but I also left with a certainty that had been growing in my chest. The sounds I heard weren't from the pipes. The water wasn't black because of rust or sediment, and the handprints on my mirror weren't left by any living person. They were messages, warnings, evidence of something that had been hidden but refused to stay buried. The final piece came from an unexpected source, a child who lived in the building. She was playing in the hallway when I came home from work. She looked up at me with serious eyes and asked if I heard the lady crying at night. When I asked which lady, she pointed to the ceiling above my apartment. Said the lady in the water was sad, said she missed her babies. That night I turned on the shower. The water ran black immediately, but this time I didn't run, I listened. The sounds weren't screams of pain, they were pleas, desperate whispers for help, for justice, for someone to finally hear the truth that had been gurgling through the pipes for 2 years. The next morning I called the police. I told them about the water, about the sounds, about the boyfriend who knew more than he was telling. They listened politely, took notes, said they would look into it, but I know they won't. The case is cold. The evidence is circumstantial. The water only turns black for me. But sometimes when I'm lying in bed, I hear the pipes groaning, and I know she's still there, still trying to tell her story, still hoping someone will finally listen to what the water has been trying to say, the truth about what happened to her. The truth about where she really went, the truth that's been flowing through the building's veins, waiting for someone brave enough to hear it. I still live in that apartment, I still hear the whispers, and every day I document everything, because someone has to remember, someone has to keep asking questions, someone has to make sure her story doesn't disappear like she did. The water may run black, but the truth is crystal clear. Some secrets refuse to stay buried, some voices refuse to be silenced, and some stories demand to be told no matter how long it takes. Crime 8, I'm not good with plants, they die on me, but this one thrived too well. It grew fast, vibrant, even seemed to lean toward me. Then one morning I noticed something dripping from the pot. Red, thick. I touched the soil, wet but not with water. It was warm. I dug a little deeper and found a tooth, then another, then something soft like flesh. I tried to throw the plant out, but the next morning it was back, sitting on the windowsill, taller, blooming, its leaves curled into a smile. That's what I told the detective when she first came to my door. She didn't believe me, of course. Who would? But I had to start somewhere, and that plant was how everything began to unravel. I'd been living in the apartment for 6 months when my neighbor brought it over, an elderly woman with gentle hands and eyes that seemed to hold secrets. She said it was a gift, something to brighten my space. I almost refused. My track record with living things was dismal, but something in her expression made me accept it. She placed it carefully on my kitchen windowsill, positioning it just so, like she knew exactly where it belonged. The first few weeks were normal. I watered it occasionally, ignored it mostly, expected it to wither like all the others. but this one was different. It grew with an urgency that made me uncomfortable. The leaves darkened to an almost black green, and the stems thickened in ways that seemed unnatural. I found myself watching it, studying the way it seemed to pulse in the morning light. Then came the smell, metallic, organic, like copper pennies mixed with something rotting. I cleaned the kitchen obsessively, checked the pipes, scrubbed the windowsill, but the smell persisted, growing stronger each day. It was coming from the plant. I started researching, spent hours online looking for explanations, searching botanical forums, reading about plant diseases and abnormal growth patterns. Nothing matched what I was seeing. The plant continued to flourish, its roots pushing against the sides of the pot with visible force. I repotted it twice, but it outgrew each container within days. The bleeding started on a Tuesday. I woke to find dark red droplets on the counter beneath the windowsill. At first I thought it was rust from the old pipes, but when I touched it, the liquid was warm and sticky. It had the consistency of blood, but that was impossible. Plants don't bleed. I called my neighbor, asked her about the plant's origins. She seemed confused, claimed she'd never given me anything. Said she barely knew me, had never been inside my apartment, but I remembered her clearly, the way she'd positioned the pot, the satisfaction in her eyes when she'd placed it just right. That's when I started digging through the soil. My fingers found the first tooth immediately, small and sharp, like it belonged to a child, then another and another. Deeper down, something soft and fibrous that felt disturbingly like tissue. I dropped the pot, watched it shatter on the kitchen floor, soil and roots spilling everywhere. I swept it all into a garbage bag, took it to the dumpster behind the building, threw it in with force. But the next morning it was back, sitting on my windowsill undamaged, the pot perfectly intact. The soil was clean, dark, rich, no trace of what I'd found inside. I started asking questions around the building. Other tenants mentioned strange sounds from the unit below mine, which had been empty for months. The superintendent was evasive, kept changing the subject whenever I brought up the previous tenant. Property records showed the apartment had been vacant since spring, but I could hear movement down there at night, footsteps, scraping sounds. The detective came after I called about the break-in. Someone had been in my apartment while I was at work, but nothing was missing. Only the plant had been moved, shifted slightly on the windowsill. I tried to explain about the bleeding, the teeth, the impossible return from the garbage. She took notes, asked if I'd been under stress lately, suggested I might benefit from talking to someone. I brought her to the kitchen, showed her the plant. It looked normal in the afternoon light, healthy and green, no sign of the dark liquid I'd seen that morning. She touched the leaves, examined the soil, found nothing unusual, but I saw the way she looked at me after that, like I was the problem. That night I heard voices from the apartment below, a woman's voice pleading, desperate, then silence. I pressed my ear to the floor, held my breath, waited, nothing. But the plant seemed to shiver on the windowsill, its leaves rustling without any breeze. I started keeping a journal, documenting everything. The times when the bleeding occurred, the sounds from downstairs, the strange dreams I'd been having about soil and roots and things buried deep. I photographed the plant daily, noting its growth patterns, the way it seemed to respond to my presence. The photos revealed something disturbing. In each image, the plant appeared slightly different, as if it was moving between shots. The leaves changed position, the stems twisted in new configurations, and in the background, just visible through the window, I could see the reflection of someone standing behind me, someone who shouldn't have been there. I confronted the superintendent again, demanded access to the apartment below. He claimed he'd lost the key, said the unit was scheduled for renovation, that the sounds I'd been hearing were probably settling pipes. but I'd seen the light under the door, smelled the same metallic odor that came from my plant drifting up through the floorboards. The breakthrough came when I found the old lease agreements in the building's office. The previous tenant of the unit below had been a woman who disappeared suddenly, leaving behind unpaid rent and belongings that were never claimed. Her name was scratched out in the records, but I could make out enough to search for her online. The articles were brief, buried in local news archives. A missing person case that had gone cold, a woman who'd vanished without explanation. Her photo showed someone younger than I'd expected, with dark hair and eyes that looked familiar. In the background of one photo, I could see a kitchen identical to mine, with the same window, the same sill where my plant now sat. I realized then that the woman who'd given me the plant, my elderly neighbor, had been wearing the same necklace visible in the missing woman's photo. The same small silver pendant, distinctive and unusual, but that was impossible. The timelines didn't match. The missing woman had been young, while my neighbor was decades older. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping properly. Every time I looked at the plant, I saw something different. The way the leaves curled suggested fingers, the stems twisted like limbs. The soil seemed to pulse with its own rhythm, and sometimes I caught glimpses of pale shapes just beneath the surface. The detective called to check on me, asked if I was feeling better. I tried to explain what I'd found, the connections between the plant and the missing woman, the sounds from downstairs. She listened patiently, then suggested I might want to consider staying somewhere else for a while, giving myself some distance from the situation. But I couldn't leave, the plant needed me. I could feel it calling when I was away, drawing me back to the apartment, to the kitchen, to the windowsill where it waited. I'd tried to kill it, poison the soil, cut the stems, denied it water. Nothing worked. It only grew stronger, more insistent. The truth came to me gradually, piece by piece, like recovering from amnesia. The elderly woman who'd given me the plant had been the missing woman all along. I'd been seeing her as she was now, aged by whatever had happened to her, changed by the years of being forgotten. She'd been trying to tell me something, to show me where she'd gone. The plant was her grave marker, her attempt to reach out from wherever she'd been buried. The teeth I'd found weren't from a child, they were hers, preserved in the soil that had been her final resting place. The bleeding was her blood, seeping up through the roots, trying to show me what had happened. I dug up the entire floor of the apartment below, working through the night with tools I'd borrowed from the building's maintenance room. The superintendent found me there in the morning, covered in dirt, surrounded by the evidence of what I'd uncovered. The bones were small, fragile, arranged in a position that suggested she'd been curled up when she died. But when the police arrived, they found nothing. Clean floorboards, no sign of disturbance, no evidence of the hole I'd dug. The superintendent claimed I'd broken in, that I'd been acting erratically for weeks. The detective looked at me with pity, like I was a puzzle she couldn't solve. The plant is still there on my windowsill waiting. Sometimes I catch it watching me, its leaves turning to follow my movement across the kitchen. The bleeding has stopped, but I can still smell that metallic odor, fainter now but persistent. I think it's satisfied, having shown me what it needed to show me. I never found out who killed her, or why, or how her remains ended up in the soil that nourished my plant. The case file lists her as still missing, and I'm listed as someone who made unsubstantiated claims about her whereabouts, but I know the truth, even if I can't prove it. The plant blooms now small white flowers that smell like earth and secrets. I tend it carefully, water it with the respect it deserves. It's all that remains of her, the only witness to whatever happened in that apartment below. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I can hear her whispering through the leaves, telling me stories I'm not sure I want to hear. Crime 9, it was hidden in the attic under a loose floorboard, a black leather book filled with photos of people I didn't know, but their faces haunted me. I couldn't place why until I searched a few online. They were all missing, every single one, different years, different places. Each photo was dated, but some looked taken moments before they vanished. The last page was empty except for a handwritten note, one more left. I shut the book. But later that night, someone slid a new photo under my door. It was me. The photo showed me standing in my kitchen holding a coffee mug I recognized, the same mug I'd used that morning. My hands were shaking as I held the image, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. The angle suggested someone had been watching me through my window, but I lived on the 3rd floor. That realization made my skin crawl. I couldn't sleep. Every sound in the building seemed amplified. The creaking of pipes, footsteps in the hallway, the distant hum of traffic. I kept checking the locks, pulling the curtains tighter. The leather album sat on my kitchen table like a dark presence, demanding attention I wasn't ready to give. The next morning, I forced myself to examine it more carefully. The photos were organized chronologically, spanning nearly 2 decades. Each person looked ordinary, caught in mundane moments. A woman reading a newspaper at a cafe, a man walking his dog, a teenager waiting at a bus stop. But there was something unsettling about each image, a quality I couldn't quite identify. I started researching the faces more systematically. The first photo showed a woman with auburn hair, dated 15 years ago. Her missing person report described her as a graduate student who vanished while walking home from the library. The second was a construction worker who disappeared after his shift. The third, a retired teacher who never returned from her evening walk. Each story followed a similar pattern, normal people living normal lives until they simply weren't there anymore. No signs of struggle, no obvious motives, no witnesses, just absence where presence once existed. I noticed something else as I studied the photos. They all seemed to be taken during routine activities, moments when the subjects would have felt safe and unobserved. The photographer had been patient, methodical. This wasn't random stalking, this was hunting. The handwriting on the final page looked familiar, but I couldn't place it. The ink was blue, the letters carefully formed. I compared it to notes I'd kept from work meetings, grocery lists, anything with writing I might recognize. Nothing matched perfectly, but there was something about the letter formation that nagged at me. I decided to visit the building's previous tenant. The landlord had mentioned an elderly woman who lived here for decades before moving to assisted living. Maybe she'd seen something, knew something about the album's origin. The care facility smelled of disinfectant and overcooked vegetables. I found her in the common room working on a crossword puzzle. Her eyes were sharp despite her age, and she remembered me immediately as the new tenant. When I described the album, her expression changed. She set down her pen and looked at me with an intensity that made me uncomfortable. She told me about a man who used to live in the building, someone who worked odd hours and kept to himself. He'd lived there for years, she said, always polite but somehow wrong in a way she couldn't explain. She remembered him because he'd helped her carry groceries once and his hands had been strangely cold. She'd mentioned it to other tenants, but everyone just shrugged it off. People are different, they'd said, but she'd never forgotten those hands or the way he'd looked at her mail when he thought she wasn't watching. The man had moved out abruptly, she continued. One day he was there, the next his apartment was empty. The landlord had found it claimed with an almost obsessive thoroughness. No forwarding address, no explanation, just gone. I asked about the timeline. She thought for a moment, then said it was around the time the last missing person report had been filed. A chill ran down my spine as I realized the implications. Back in my apartment, I examined the album with fresh eyes. The photos weren't just documentation, they were trophies. Each image represented a life interrupted, a story left unfinished. The photographer had been collecting these moments, preserving them like specimens in a display case. But why had he left the album behind? And why had someone else continued his work by photographing me? I spent the next few days researching the building's history, looking for any connection between the missing people and this location. 3 of them had lived within a few blocks of here. 2 others had worked in the area. The pattern was subtle but unmistakable. The realization hit me like a physical blow. I wasn't just the next target. I was living in the hunter's former nest, surrounded by the evidence of his crimes. The album wasn't abandoned, it was bait. I called the police, but explaining the situation felt impossible. A mysterious photo album found in an attic, a picture of myself slid under my door. It sounded like paranoid delusion, even to me. The officer who took my report was polite but clearly skeptical. He promised to look into it, but I could hear the dismissal in his voice. That night I heard footsteps in the hallway, slow, deliberate steps that paused outside my door. I held my breath, waiting for a knock that never came. Instead, I heard the soft scrape of paper against wood. Another photo, this one showed me sleeping in my bed, taken from an angle that suggested someone had been inside my apartment. The timestamp indicated it was taken the previous night, while I'd been unconscious and vulnerable. I packed a bag and left immediately, checking into a hotel across town. But even there, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Every person in the lobby seemed suspicious. Every shadow in the parking lot could be hiding someone with a camera. The next morning, I found a voicemail on my phone. No words, just breathing. But in the background, I could hear a sound I recognized. The distinctive creak of the floorboard in my apartment, the same one that had concealed the album. Someone was still there in the space I'd thought was mine. Waiting, watching, preparing to add another page to their collection. I never returned to that apartment. I never learned who had been taking those photos or what happened to the people in the album. But sometimes, late at night, I wonder if somewhere out there, a new album is being assembled. One that includes my picture and the photos of others who made the mistake of getting too close to the truth. The police never found anything. The building's security cameras had been mysteriously disabled for weeks. The landlord claimed ignorance about the previous tenant's identity. The trail went cold like so many others before it. But I still have the album. I kept it as evidence, as proof that what I experienced was real. Sometimes I look through it, studying those faces, wondering what their final moments were like, whether they knew they were being watched or if they simply vanished into the ordinary rhythm of their lives. The empty page at the end remains unfilled. The note about one more left feels like a promise unfulfilled, a debt still owed. And despite everything, I can't shake the feeling that somewhere, someone is still watching, still waiting, still collecting their trophies one photograph at a time. Story 10, the motel stood there, a relic of the past, a place transient souls passed through in the dead of night. The key exchanged hands with a silent warning from the clerk, a furtive glance hinting at hidden mysteries. Remember, avoid the final door on the left. His hushed words lingered in the air. Intrigue tugged at her, a persistent itch that begged to be scratched. That evening, as shadows danced along the corridor, she found herself standing before that forbidden door. The brass handle sent a chill through her fingertips, its surface unwelcoming. To the naked eye, the door blended seamlessly with its neighbors, yet as she pressed her ear against it, a soft exhale brushed against her senses from the other side. Detective Morgan Reed emerged from the haze of sleep, stepping beneath the cautionary tape marking the scene. The scent assaulted her first, a metallic tang that spoke volumes without words. Blood had seeped into the fabric underfoot, staining it a deep, ominous hue. Within the room, conflicting elements clashed, a pristine bathroom, an undisturbed bed, and the grim tableau in between. A young woman lay lifeless on the floor, her golden locks splayed like a halo. Vacant eyes gazed at the ceiling, frozen in a silent scream or a gasp of terror. Reed knelt beside the victim, mindful of the evidence markers that stood sentinel around her. The third one this season, the forensic expert noted clinically, capturing the scene with his lens. A familiar pattern, Reed nodded solemnly, absorbing the details before her. The victim's attire spoke of a different world, a world far removed from this forgotten inn. A handbag of luxury lay open on the nightstand, contents undisturbed. It was not a crime of theft, but a crime of passion, a crime of purpose. The motel manager lingered in the doorway, his complexion drained of color. She checked in alone, paid in cash. I never imagined, his voice faltered, the weight of tragedy heavy upon his shoulders. She was discovered by the maid. Back at the precinct, Reed pieced together the puzzle on the board before her. 3 women, their resemblance uncanny, all discovered in similar establishments. Speculation swirled, whispers of a predator in their midst gaining momentum. Autopsy results are in, Detective Hayes announced, his tone grave. Death by strangulation manual, no trace of DNA under the victim's nails, no signs of a sexual motive. Reed furrowed her brow, a sense of unease settling in her gut. This was not a crime born of opportunity, but of intimate knowledge, of personal vendetta. Days blurred into nights as the investigation deepened. Surveillance footage yielded no breakthrough, painting a blank canvas of the victim's final hours. Elaine Werner, the victim, a financial analyst with no known adversaries, a woman meticulous in her ways, found in a place she would never willingly choose. A breakthrough came in the form of a conversation with Werner's sister. She spoke of a man from her workplace, the sister divulged, hands trembling around her cup. A man shrouded in secrecy, perhaps married. Reed lined in her gaze intense. Did she mention a name? Only C, the sister whispered, a shadow of fear in her eyes. The focus shifted to Werner's workplace, where colleagues painted a portrait of a reserved professional, a woman who kept her personal life veiled. Yet within Werner's desk, a clue awaited, a business card bearing the name Charles Emerson, Senior Vice President. Emerson exuded charm and poise when questioned, his alibi airtight, his innocence a facade carefully maintained. But Reed saw through the veneer, sensing a darkness lurking beneath his polished exterior. Did you have a relationship with Elaine Werner beyond the office? Reed inquired casually. A flicker of discomfort passed over Emerson's features, fleeting but telling. Strictly professional, he asserted, a hint of defiance in his tone. Forensic analysis, however, wove a different narrative, linking Emerson to Werner through partial fingerprints found in her handbag. The pieces of the puzzle fell into place, revealing a sinister truth hidden in plain sight. In the interrogation room, Emerson's mask crumbled, his confession a damning echo in the sterile confines. We were involved, but it was over. She threatened to unravel everything. His voice trembled with suppressed rage. The trial unfolded swiftly, a spectacle of justice served cold. 3 families found closure as Emerson was condemned to a life behind bars, his stoic demeanor a shield against the world's judgment. Yet in Reed's eyes, a flicker of something darker lingered, a void where empathy should have dwelled. The tale of the door on the left case echoed through the annals of crime, dissected by minds hungry for answers. Psychologists probed Emerson's psyche, seeking to unravel the enigma of his deeds. But for Reed, the story remained an open wound, a reminder that shadows lurked behind even the most innocuous facades. In the evidence vault, 3 keys lay dormant, relics of a past best left undisturbed. For some doors, once unlocked, led only to darkness that never truly faded. Story 11. The aged apartment exuded a sense of history, its walls holding secrets whispered by time. The heating system, a weary sentinel, groaned in protest while the pipes rattled like old bones. These familiar sounds cocooned the space in a shroud of routine, comforting in their predictability. Or so she convinced herself, until the moment she heard it, a voice, delicate yet unmistakable, drifting through the labyrinthine network of vents. It wasn't the ordinary murmur of a neighbor's conversation or the echo of footsteps in the hallway. No, this was different. It was a whisper, intimate and beckoning, calling out her name with a ghostly allure. Intrigued yet apprehensive, she leaned closer, pressing her ear against the cool metal grate. Her heart quickened, a surge of adrenaline coursing through her veins as a chill breeze brushed past her cheek, carrying with it a soft, almost playful utterance. "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw stood in the heart of the empty apartment, a solitary figure amidst the silent chaos. Her gaze, unwavering, fixated on the rusted vent cover that had been forcefully pried from the wall. Around her, the forensics team moved with precision, their cameras capturing every detail of the eerie scene. Alina Reeves, the missing woman whose fate had led them to this haunting place, had vanished without a trace for 7 long days until a lingering odor finally unveiled her hidden presence. Officer Patel, his voice measured, recounted the victim's earlier claims of spectral voices emanating from the vents, dismissed by the building's management as mere quirks of an antiquated heating system. As Shaw knelt by the vent, her keen eyes caught the telltale signs of struggle, the deep gouges etched into the metal, bearing witness to desperate attempts to break free from within. It was a silent plea for escape, a cryptic message etched in metal. Alina Reeves, a beloved kindergarten teacher, had left behind a trail of unanswered questions. Her disappearance had cast a shadow over her once vibrant life, leaving behind a classroom filled with unopened cards from worried students and a sister haunted by the memory of a gradual descent into paranoia. The apartment, once a sanctuary, now bore the weight of tragedy in its stillness. Shaw's scrutiny unveiled the subtle remnants of a life interrupted: the meticulously made bed, the abandoned coffee mug, the chair positioned beneath the vent as if awaiting a clandestine visitor. As the investigation progressed, unsettling revelations surfaced. Fibers from Alina's favorite cardigan trapped in the vent, a foreign fingerprint on the inside of the cover, and haunting audio recordings retrieved from her phone. Shaw, enveloped in the solitude of her car, listened to Alina's trembling voice, a plea for a response from the unseen entity that had invaded her sanctuary. The history of the apartment building unfurled like a sinister tapestry, woven with threads of dread and foreboding. Previous tenants had fled, driven by unseen forces, whispers in the night, and hallucinations that lingered long after they departed. Harold Weber, the enigmatic building superintendent, emerged as a central figure in this macabre tale, his facade of indifference masking a deeper truth. The investigation took a chilling turn upon the discovery of a concealed passage in Alina's bathroom, a hidden conduit linking her world to a shadow realm within the walls. Evidences of an intruder emerged: a phantom dweller who had made the building's infrastructure his domain, a voyeur lurking in the shadows, savoring the intimate moments of unsuspecting tenants. Weber's meticulously organized files, his digital shrine to his victims, and the chilling artifacts discovered in his possession painted a portrait of a predator whose obsession transcended boundaries of sanity. The whisperer in the walls, the unseen puppeteer pulling the strings of fate, had been unmasked. As the trial unfolded, a chilling portrait of a man consumed by his delusions emerged. Weber's calm facade cracked under the weight of evidence, his unsettling words echoing in the courtroom, a haunting reminder of the darkness that lurked within the familiar confines of the apartment building. With Weber's conviction, a sense of closure descended upon the once troubled space. Yet the whispers endured, a spectral chorus that reverberated through the empty corridors, a testament to the enduring legacy of fear and unease that lingered within its walls. The building, now a silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded within its embrace, stood as a monument to the fragile boundary between sanctuary and nightmare. Story 12. In the attic, nestled beneath a worn blanket, they discovered it a porcelain doll, ancient and fragile, with vivid blue eyes that seemed to watch without blinking. Sarah and Michael, a young couple captivated by the allure of a Victorian house bought at auction, initially brushed off the doll as just another forgotten relic of the past. But that night, as they drifted into slumber, a subtle unease lingered in the air, a heaviness that settled in the room. Morning light revealed a chilling sight, the doll now perched at the foot of their bed, a silent sentinel in the dim dawn. The history of the house whispered tales of mystery and misfortune, drawing in Detective Rachel Winters on an autumn morning crisp with anticipation. Within the master bedroom, a macabre scene unfolded. The female victim posed in an unnatural stance, eyes wide with fear, while her male counterpart lay in the hall as if fleeing an unseen terror. The crime scene, pristine and devoid of typical evidence, bore an eerie resemblance to a meticulously crafted tableau. As Detective Winters delved into the investigation, a pattern emerged from the shadows of the past. Previous owners had met tragic fates under puzzling circumstances, each incident shrouded in inexplicable phenomena. Witnesses spoke of spectral sightings and ghostly echoes within the empty rooms, hinting at a presence that defied rational explanation. Forensic analysis unveiled a haunting trail of vintage fibers, hinting at a connection to the antique doll found within the house. Microscopic traces of porcelain dust mingled with enigmatic organic matter, leaving a spectral imprint of a malevolent force that eluded tangible grasp. The attic, a focal point of the couple's renovation plans, harbored secrets that transcended the boundaries of reality. A faded newspaper clipping unearthed by Detective Winters shed light on a tragic chapter in the house's history, a tormented doll maker, driven by grief and obsession, whose final creation bore an uncanny resemblance to the doll discovered by Sarah and Michael. The spectral handprints and ethereal residue mapped a spectral path from past to present, weaving a tapestry of dread and despair. Family lore whispered of arcane rituals and forbidden knowledge, hinting at a dark pact that imbued the doll with a sinister life force. The boundaries between the living and the dead blurred in the chilling revelation, leaving the detective grasping at shadows in her pursuit of truth. The enigma of the doll defied conventional logic, slipping through the cracks of reality like a phantom in the night. Detective Winters, haunted by the specter of unsolved mysteries, found herself ensnared in a web of supernatural intrigue that defied closure. The doll, a harbinger of doom, vanished into the shadows, leaving behind a legacy of unanswered questions and unresolved fates. The house, a silent witness to the passage of time, changed hands once more, its dark legacy lingering in the whispers of the wind. The attic, a shrine to forgotten memories, remained undisturbed, a silent sentinel guarding secrets best left buried. And on moonlit nights, a faint laughter echoed through the empty corridors, a ghostly reminder of a past that refused to rest. Story 13. The apartment lay dormant for endless months, a forgotten space waiting to be awakened by the presence of new tenants. As they crossed the threshold, their expectations were low, anticipating nothing more than a layer of dust settled upon forgotten furniture. However, one door stood defiantly closed, resisting all attempts to reveal its secrets. It was a closet, shrouded in mystery, locked from within as if guarding untold stories. When the persistent landlord finally managed to force it open, the tenants braced themselves for the mundane sight of old coats or discarded items. Yet what greeted their eyes sent shivers down their spines. The walls were marred with deep, erratic scratches, etched into the wood with a desperation that echoed through the silent room. And nestled in the corner, a relic of the past, a vintage flip phone, its once vibrant battery now drained, save for the haunting glow of a single unread message on the screen. Detective Morgan Shaw, a seasoned investigator, felt a chill run down her spine as she surveyed the eerie scene before her. It wasn't the absence of blood or overt violence that unnerved her, but the silent testimony of those haunting scratch marks, a silent cry for help from someone trapped within that confined space, battling against invisible foes. "We need forensics here immediately," she instructed her partner, Officer Reed, who diligently captured the haunting images of the scratched walls, "and gather all records of the previous tenants." The message on the phone, stark in its simplicity, bore a weighty proclamation: "I know what you did." The landlord, a jittery figure with perpetually clammy palms, nervously recounted the departure of the previous tenant, a young woman of quiet demeanor who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind unpaid rent and a lingering sense of unease. Forensic analysis of the scratches revealed a grim truth: traces of blood embedded within the grooves, most belonging to a single individual. Emma Caldwell, a 28-year-old woman reported missing after her abrupt disappearance. Yet amidst the familiar DNA, two samples stood out, one unidentified, the other belonging to a man presumed dead for 2 long years. As Shaw delved deeper into the enigmatic puzzle, Emma's apartment unveiled fragments of her interrupted existence, a life put on hold, with unanswered phone calls, a solitary coffee mug abandoned in the sink, and a bed meticulously made, betraying a sense of order in chaos. Her phone records hinted at a mysterious presence, a shadowy figure in her life, hinted at but never fully revealed. The pieces of the puzzle slowly coalesced as Officer Reed uncovered a crucial detail: Emma's mention of a secretive boyfriend, described only as intense and private. Surveillance footage captured a fleeting glimpse of a man in a baseball cap shadowing her movements, his identity veiled in secrecy. The breakthrough came with the discovery of partial fingerprints on the closet door, a chilling revelation linking the enigmatic figure to a past shrouded in darkness. Derek Mercer, presumed dead, had left his mark on the confined space where Emma's fate had been sealed. He staged his own death, Shaw concluded, her mind racing to unravel the intricate web of deceit and manipulation woven by a masterful predator. The connection between Emma and Mercer deepened as the investigation unearthed a parallel tragedy: another missing woman, Lynette Porter, whose spectral presence haunted the edges of their inquiry. A trail of breadcrumbs led them to a secluded property owned by Mercer's kin, where a harrowing discovery awaited them. Behind the imposing doors of a hidden basement lay Lynette Porter, a living specter of suffering, imprisoned in a nightmarish echo of Emma's confinement. "He forced me to bear witness," Lynette murmured, her gaze vacant, haunted by the horrors she had endured. Mercer's perverse obsession with control, meticulously documented in chilling journals, painted a portrait of a man consumed by a malevolent desire to dominate and destroy. The manhunt for Mercer spanned across jurisdictions, a relentless pursuit of a shadow that eluded the grasp of justice. Forensic psychologists delved into the depths of his twisted psyche, uncovering a chilling revelation he didn't seek mere death, but a cruel spectacle of suffering in the suffocating confines of his twisted world. When Mercer was finally apprehended at a bus terminal, a specter of calm acceptance enveloped him, as if he had foreseen the inevitable conclusion of his dark odyssey. In his possession, a macabre arsenal, a roll of duct tape, a gleaming hunting knife, and a newspaper clipping chronicling Emma's vanishing. During interrogation, Mercer spun tales of twisted justification, weaving a tapestry of half-truths and delusions that obscured the stark reality of his monstrous deeds. The trial that followed revealed the intricate tapestry of lies he had spun, the elaborate charade of death and rebirth that shielded him from the consequences of his actions. The jury's swift verdict echoed through the courtroom, sealing Mercer's fate with a resounding declaration of guilt. As the judge pronounced a sentence of eternal confinement, Mercer's fleeting smile betrayed a glimpse of an inscrutable satisfaction, a private narrative known only to him. In a moment of poignant closure, Lynette Porter addressed the court, her voice a beacon of resilience amidst the shadows of despair. "He sought to imprison us in darkness," she declared, her gaze unflinching. "But as he withers in his cell, I shall embrace the warmth of the sun." The case left an indelible mark on detective protocols, reshaping the approach to missing persons investigations and emphasizing the intricate patterns of relationships that often hide dark truths. Detective Shaw, a stalwart guardian of justice, preserved the closet door from Emma's apartment as a somber reminder, a silent testament to the enduring strength of those who fought to survive in the face of unspeakable horrors. Story 14, the gentle current flowed lazily that quiet morning, the water reflecting the soft hues of the dawn sky. The fisherman, lost in his thoughts, almost missed the peculiar sight of a suitcase bobbing near the shore. Initially mistaking it for discarded clothes, he felt a shiver run down his spine as he drew closer, the pungent odor assaulting his senses, thick, suffocating, unmistakable. The case was ensnared in chains, its once sharp edges now weathered and rusted. When the authorities pried it open, it wasn't garments they discovered. It was hair, fingers frozen in a haunting grip, and at the very bottom, a chilling message: "This isn't the first." Detective Sarah Mercer, her face a mask of composure, pressed a handkerchief delicately to her nose as she surveyed the grim tableau. The victim, a woman in her mid-30s with dark locks and pallid skin, now marred by the water's touch, lay silently. The meticulous medical examiner meticulously documented every detail before the body was reverently taken away. What struck Mercer amidst the macabre scene wasn't just the manner of disposal, but the eerie reverence shown to the victim's appearance: manicured nails, freshly styled hair, clad in opulent attire. "She was not discarded here," Mercer remarked softly, her gaze fixed on the tranquil waters caressing the muddy bank. "She was prepared, adorned." The victim was soon identified as Catherine Walsh, a successful real estate agent renowned for her dealings in high-end properties. Divorced, childless, she dwelled alone in an affluent neighborhood. Colleagues painted a portrait of her as driven, exacting, and fiercely private. Her disappearance had been noted by her assistant, who raised the alarm when she failed to show up for a crucial showing to affluent clients. She would never miss that appointment, the assistant asserted adamantly. That sale would have been the pinnacle of her career. As investigators combed through Walsh's sleek, modernist abode, a sense of eerie perfection enveloped them. Every aspect was flawlessly arranged, designer furniture placed just so, surfaces gleaming without a speck of dust. The refrigerator housed meticulously arranged meals, labeled by the day. Her wardrobe showcased garments organized by hue, shoes snug in protective sheaths. The one anomaly lay in her home office, a slightly ajar drawer that yielded a leather-bound journal. The final entry sent a chill down Mercer's spine. He's watching again, same car, different plates. Delving into Walsh's digital footprint unearthed a peculiar pattern in her emails, repeated messages from unfamiliar addresses, all bearing the same unsettling phrase, "I see your perfection," each missive precisely timed day after day. Her browsing history hinted at a quest for security systems and self-defense tools. Mercer pieced these fragments together with the meticulous staging of the crime scene. "Our perpetrator is methodical," she confided to her partner. "This wasn't a crime of passion, this was a ritual." A breakthrough emerged from an unexpected quarter. A local pawnshop proprietor recognized Walsh's distinctive emerald necklace, absent from her effects. The man who had pawned it was a nondescript maintenance worker named Michael Linden. Surveillance footage revealed Linden's frequent visits to Walsh's building, sometimes with his cart of tools, other times without, always during her absences while showcasing properties. Upon raiding Linden's modest dwelling, detectives were greeted by a chilling sight: the walls adorned with clandestine snapshots of Walsh and other women, all sharing a striking resemblance, all caught unawares. Some images were cruelly crossed out in red ink. Walsh was the third victim. Concealed behind a false panel in his closet, investigators unearthed a macabre shrine. Each victim's possessions meticulously displayed: a hairbrush bearing stray strands, tissues imprinted with lipstick, keys, and receipts. Every collection accompanied by a meticulous journal chronicling their routines, preferences, quirks. The interrogation room turned icy as Linden was brought in. Despite his unassuming appearance and soft-spoken manner, his demeanor remained unchanged when confronted with the damning evidence. "They were flawed," he eventually intoned, his voice devoid of emotion. "They projected perfection, but I saw past the facade. Catherine's desk drawer was always in disarray. She'd miss a spot when applying her lipstick. Her perfection was a charade." The hunt for the two victims alluded to in his cryptic note led investigators to remote locales where two more suitcases were recovered. Each harbored women akin to Walsh in appearance, fellow real estate agents who prided themselves on their meticulous attention to detail. Throughout his trial, Linden sat in stoic silence, his countenance a mask of indifference as the prosecution unraveled his meticulous modus operandi. For months he had shadowed each woman, studying their lives, infiltrating their homes, before meticulously styling them to his twisted ideals of perfection, culminating in their demise. The families of the victims bore silent witness as the judge pronounced a sentence of life imprisonment without parole. While the case was officially closed for Detective Mercer, a cloud of unanswered queries lingered. What had triggered Linden's fixation on these specific women? What imperfection within himself had he sought to expunge through his heinous acts? Down the river, where the waters meandered towards the horizon, erasing all traces, in Mercer's precinct, nestled on her desk, laid copies of those chilling journals, a stark reminder that behind the veneer of normalcy, darkness may lurk. And sometimes the most insidious predators are those camouflaged in plain sight, patiently observing, waiting for a solitary flaw to unravel the facade. Story 15. The vintage apartment exuded character with its groaning pipes and creaking floorboards. Yet the new tenant sensed a peculiar abnormality in the sounds she heard. The footsteps above were too precise, too controlled for comfort. They echoed slowly and deliberately, originating from the floor above hers. Curiosity mingled with unease, compelling her to take action. One night, mustering her courage, she tapped the ceiling with a broomstick. The sound ceased abruptly, plunging the space into a profound hush. Then a solitary knock resounded from within the ceiling itself. Sarah Coleman chose to keep the strange knocking episode to herself, attributing it to the settling of the old building or perhaps a small creature seeking refuge in the attic. As the nightly footsteps persisted, she adapted by cranking up the volume on her television, donning headphones to bed, anything to drown out the rhythmic footfalls that traversed her ceiling in the darkness. Detective Morris's attention was drawn to the apartment when a maintenance worker stumbled upon a concealed crawlspace during routine repairs. While fixing a water leak outside Sarah's unit, the worker dismantled a portion of drywall, uncovering a narrow passage that defied the building's blueprints. Illuminated by his flashlight, the hidden space revealed a makeshift living area, scattered food wrappers, empty water bottles, a soiled blanket, and a small journal. Alarmed, the building superintendent alerted the authorities. Arriving with his partner, Detective Rivera, Morris found the maintenance worker visibly shaken, muttering about an unknown presence dwelling within the walls. The journal contained meticulous observations of Sarah Coleman, her daily routine, her visitors, her meals, her viewing habits, her moments of rest. The writing, initially neat, descended into chaos towards the final pages, adorned with cryptic symbols. The subject resists my influence, the last entry read. She dares to ignore me. No one ignores me. Forensic teams combed the crawl space, unearthing fingerprints untraceable in any database. They unveiled a labyrinth of passages interwoven into the building's structure, some dating back decades. These passages linked to 5 different units, culminating in observation points disguised as innocuous fixtures or minor damages, yet converging solely in Sarah Coleman's apartment. Interviewing current residents yielded no unusual accounts beyond typical apartment noises. Former tenants painted a different picture. 3 predecessors of Sarah recounted sensations of being watched or hearing unexplained movements. One tenant vacated after a mere fortnight, silenced by fear of seeming paranoid. A breakthrough emerged with the discovery of microscopic blood splatter in one of the hidden spaces, matching the DNA of Martin Weaver, a former resident who had vanished inexplicably 4 years prior, residing directly below Sarah's abode. Delving deeper into Martin's disappearance, Morris unraveled a chilling narrative. Martin had voiced grievances about noises emanating from above his unit, confronting the solitary occupant named Edward, a recluse who departed without a trace shortly after Martin's disappearance. Edward's history revealed a pattern of transient living, always selecting top-floor units, maintaining minimal social ties, then vanishing abruptly without forwarding details. Investigative pursuits unveiled Edward's remote property, housing a cabin adorned with photographs and notes. Captured within were images of former apartment residents, comprehensive ventilation system maps, and journals chronicling specimen observations and habitat maintenance. A corkboard displayed missing persons, reports 6 in total, each linked to Edward's residency locations. Beneath the board, etched grooves on the wooden floor hinted at a heavy object dragged repeatedly. Cadaver dogs led investigators to disturbed earth behind the cabin, unearthing one grave after another. As forensic experts worked to identify the victims, Detective Morris revisited Sarah's building, now sealed off. Yet, whispers of occasional noises persisted among residents. During security installations, maintenance workers stumbled upon a new notebook concealed in a corner where the ceiling met the wall, a continuation of the enigmatic journal. The initial page bore a chilling inscription: "My old sanctuary is unveiled, yet my new one remains concealed." The handwriting mirrored the previous entries. The final page depicted a crude sketch of Sarah's apartment layout, marking a fresh passage in crimson. A date was inscribed for that very night. Officers rushed to evacuate Sarah, only to find her dwelling deserted. Her phone lay abandoned, the television flickering, the shower running. In the bathroom, a message materialized through the dissipating steam, etched by a finger on the mirror. "Look up." The shower's ceiling panel had been dislodged. The pursuit of Edward, now identified as Edward Mercer, persisted. A former construction worker skilled in renovations, his intricate knowledge of building structures facilitated the creation of concealed observation points and passages. Thermal scans unveiled no current occupancy within Sarah's walls. Sarah Coleman's whereabouts remain unknown, her case entwined with a string of disappearances across state lines. Authorities cautioned apartment managers about unauthorized modifications and hidden spaces. Amidst the haunting revelations, Detective Morris found himself haunted by the image of Sarah, alone in her apartment, hearing phantom footsteps from above, the footsteps that ceased upon her knock and then replied. In the solitude of his own abode, Detective Morris sometimes gazes upwards, attuned to the silence, pondering who else might be listening in the shadows of the night. Story 16. The old Polaroid held secrets within its faded borders, whispering of a past long forgotten. Faces frozen in time, smiles captured in flickering candlelight, nothing out of the ordinary at first glance. Yet, as the daughter sifted through the box of cherished memories left behind by her mother, a chilling discovery awaited. Among the familiar scenes of family gatherings from years gone by, a sinister presence lurked in the background of each photo. Sarah Winters stumbled upon the collection while sorting through her mother's attic after the funeral, the labeled box of memories beckoning her with its nostalgic allure. What should have been a comforting journey down memory lane soon transformed into the unraveling of a haunting mystery. In the initial photograph, he was a mere shadow at the periphery, a ghostly figure lingering during her childhood birthday celebration. Gradually, with each subsequent snapshot, the mysterious man crept closer, his form becoming more defined, his presence more palpable. Puzzled and unnerved, Sarah reached out to her father, her voice trembling as she described the eerie revelation. But his response only deepened the sense of foreboding that gripped her soul. "Dad, who is the man in the background of these photos?" she implored, met with a tense silence before a disconcerted gasp escaped his lips. "What man? There shouldn't be anyone there except family." Seeking answers, Sarah turned to Detective Marcus Reed, laying out the enigmatic photographs before him in a dimly lit precinct, the patter of rain against the windows adding to the eerie ambience. With a weathered hand, the detective scrutinized each image, his keen gaze tracing the progression of the shadowy figure as it insidiously encroached upon the joyous scenes frozen in time. The realization dawned upon them both: the intruder, once hidden in plain sight, now unveiled in all his chilling proximity to the unsuspecting children. As the investigation unfolded, a macabre connection emerged, linking the phantom figure to a dark chapter of unsolved abductions from the past. Through meticulous analysis and technological enhancements, the veil of anonymity shrouding the mysterious man began to lift, revealing telltale clues that led to the unmasking of a malevolent force long evading justice. Dental records provided the crucial breakthrough, tying the enigmatic presence in the photographs to Robert Keller, a maintenance worker with a sinister past of vanished children and chilling disappearances. The man who had seamlessly blended into the background of family gatherings, his hidden malevolence casting a shadow over decades of unsuspecting revelry. With the discovery of buried artifacts and long-lost possessions, the truth emerged in stark clarity, painting a harrowing picture of a predator lurking in the guise of an unassuming stranger. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place, bringing closure to families haunted by unanswered questions and unresolved grief. Alone in her apartment, surrounded by the haunting images that had laid bare a web of deceit and tragedy, Sarah reflected on the chilling truth that had come to light. The specter in the photographs, once a spectral enigma, now stood exposed in the harsh glare of justice, his malevolence finally unmasked and his victims vindicated. The box of memories, once a source of solace and joy, now served as a grim testament to the unseen threats that linger among us, moving undetected through the fabric of our lives. Hidden figures captured in frozen moments of time, their presence a reminder of the darkness that can lurk within the seemingly innocent frames of cherished photographs. Story 17. In the beginning, the new inhabitants of the old Victorian house saw nothing but peeling wallpaper. An innocent enough sight, they thought, yet as they carefully removed each layer, a hidden narrative began to unfold beneath their fingertips. The faded papers whispered a tale not meant for casual observers. Scrawled in ink, repetitive and urgent, a name dominated the wall: Alina Winters. Every inch covered with those two words, etched in a frenzy of uneven script. It wasn't a name belonging to the previous proprietors. It didn't exist in any official documents. But when curiosity led them to search online, a solitary result emerged: a cold case of a missing person from decades past. And the chilling realization: the woman in the yellowed photograph bore an uncanny resemblance to the one who had passed on the keys to the house, Margaret Cavendish. Michael and Sarah Klein had never planned to embark on a renovation project right away. The allure of the charming, antiquated abode had captivated them. Its intricate woodwork and soaring ceilings spoke of a bygone era, weaving tales of yesteryears into the very fabric of the house. The unraveling began innocuously enough: a water stain in the master bedroom catching Sarah's discerning eye. A discolored patch on the floral wallpaper hinted at a hidden secret beneath the surface. With cautious fingers, Michael probed the area, peeling back the layers one by one. What they found beneath the damaged exterior was a journey through time encapsulated in wallpaper. Paisley patterns from the 70s gave way to stripes from an earlier era. But it was the third layer that held the unexpected treasure: a name, dark against the aged paper, repeated incessantly. Alina Winters. The letters danced across the wall in a desperate, almost pleading manner. Alina Winters, Sarah murmured, her touch tracing the haunting words. The discovery stirred a dormant unease within them. That evening, bathed in the soft glow of the kitchen lights, Michael delved into the depths of the internet, scouring property records for any mention of Alina Winters. The search yielded nothing concrete until a digitized newspaper article shed light on the mystery. Alina Winters, a young woman of 27, vanished without a trace during the winter months. And the photograph accompanying the article revealed a face that mirrored Margaret Cavendish's, their enigmatic house cellar. 30 years have passed, Michael whispered, the weight of the revelation hanging heavy in the air. Margaret could be Alina, but Sarah's voice faltered, her thoughts mirroring the disquiet that had settled between them. The missing woman's story remained unfinished, shrouded in mystery and uncertainty. Driven by an insatiable curiosity that bordered on obsession, Sarah delved deeper into the house's history, tracing its lineage through previous owners. The renovation took a backseat as they devoted their evenings to unraveling the enigma that had woven its tendrils through the walls of their new home. Margaret Cavendish's brief tenure as the owner raised questions, given the meticulous paperwork usually associated with property transactions. The retired detective assigned to Alina's case provided scant information, his memories fading like echoes in the wind. When the retired detective failed to recall a Margaret Cavendish, their suspicions deepened. The revelation of the two women's uncanny resemblance spurred them on, leading to a breakthrough in the investigation. The forensics team descended upon their home, transforming it into a hive of activity as they meticulously documented and analyzed the writings on the wall. The ink, aged approximately 3 decades, bore the weight of a story long forgotten. As Sarah unearthed a hidden compartment beneath the bedroom floorboards, a chilling truth emerged. Alina Winter's driver's license lay amidst a cache of identification cards, each bearing a different name but the same haunting visage. And at the heart of it all, Margaret Cavendish, a persona fabricated with meticulous detail, a guise concealing a darker reality. The narrative took an unexpected turn when DNA analysis linked hair strands from the wall to Alina Winters, while fingerprints pointed to a psychiatric patient named Rebecca Eldridge. A woman plagued by dissociative identity disorder, Rebecca had woven a complex tapestry of personas, each vying for dominance over her fractured mind. The walls stood witness to her struggle, the name Alina Winters a lifeline to a reality she could no longer grasp. Michael and Sarah watched in silent contemplation as the backyard became a scene of excavation, the past clawing its way to the surface. Alina's remains, long buried beneath the earth, finally found solace in the light of justice. And as the truth unfurled its tendrils, Rebecca Eldridge, in the guise of Margaret Cavendish, faced the consequences of a life lived in shadows. The walls bore witness to a tale of deception and tragedy, a story woven in ink and blood, a testament to the fragility of the human psyche. And as the night whispered its secrets, the house settled into a slumber, the echoes of the past fading into the embrace of the present. Story 18, the mysterious package arrived without a return label or tracking number, just a damp cardboard box glistening with morning dew. It wasn't intended for Sarah Miller. The address was correct, but the name was unfamiliar. She knew she should have ignored it, left it resting on the porch. Yet curiosity beckoned her, pulling her towards the unknown. With cautious hands, she peeled back the tape, anticipating books, perhaps clothes, something ordinary. But what lay inside was far from mundane, a VHS tape and a solitary sticky note that simply stated, "Watch alone." Sarah held the black plastic cassette, its weight feeling oddly heavy, as though it carried the burden of forbidden secrets. Her fingers traced the worn edges, exploring the imperfections of the plastic casing. The note, with its urgent strokes, hinted at a story waiting to be unraveled. Around her, the suburban neighborhood hummed with its usual rhythms, a distant dog barking, children's laughter, the drone of a lawnmower. Life continued as if unaware of the mysterious delivery. Bringing the package inside, Sarah placed it on her kitchen counter, uncertainty clouding her thoughts. The name Daniel Woodacre meant nothing to her. In her 4 years at the house, she had never encountered that name before. The previous owners, the Johnsons, had bid farewell to the place, leaving behind memories, not misdelivered mail. Curiosity wrestled with unease as she glanced at her VCR, a relic of days gone by. There was something about the tape that called to her a puzzle waiting to be solved. Against her instincts, Sarah inserted the tape into the player. Static crackled on the screen before sharpening into focus. A dimly lit room emerged, casting shadows that hinted at secrets. A man sat in a chair, his face initially obscured by darkness. "My name is Daniel Woodacre," his voice resonated, quiet yet resolute. "If you're watching this, someone has found you, and they will find me too." Leaning closer, his tired eyes glistened in the dim light, revealing a man burdened by sleepless nights and looming threats. "I didn't harm her, you must know that, but they have framed me with evidence I never left behind." As the camera angle shifted, the room's stark emptiness came into view, a stark backdrop for a man on the run, unjustly accused. They fabricated it all, the police report, the witnesses, the planted evidence. I never crossed paths with Catherine Walsh until the day she was found dead. His voice wavered, betraying the weight of his innocence. My DNA, my fingerprints, all at the crime scene, a setup beyond my control. Detective Eliza Ramirez studied the VHS tape on her desk, the fifth in a series of mysterious deliveries. Each tape bore Daniel Whitaker's plea, a man implicated in Catherine Walsh's murder, a man who had vanished into thin air. The case seemed clear-cut at first, a young woman strangled in her own home, evidence pointing to Whitaker's guilt. But the arrival of the tapes cast a shadow of doubt over the narrative. As Ramirez delved deeper, she uncovered Catherine's crusade against PharmaCorp, a pharmaceutical giant entangled in deception. Catherine's pursuit of truth had led to her untimely demise, with Whitaker becoming the unwitting pawn in a game of corporate malice. The pieces of the puzzle began to shift, revealing a darker truth beneath the surface. Sarah Miller received a second package, filled with incriminating documents that exposed PharmaCorp's treachery. As Ramirez connected with other recipients of the tapes, a pattern emerged, a web of deceit spun by those in power. Whitaker's trail led back to his role in IT security, where he stumbled upon evidence of Catherine's surveillance. The truth was a dangerous commodity, one that had cost Catherine her life and Whitaker his freedom. The breakthrough came when Sarah noticed a crucial detail in the tape, a reflection that unraveled the conspiracy. Together with Ramirez, they traced the evidence back to a storage unit where the sinister truth lay hidden. Whitaker's journal, Catherine's files, and damning proof of framing, all within reach, waiting to shatter the facade of innocence. Justice unfolded not in a grand arrest, but in the quiet unveiling of truth. Executives fell, confessions were made, and the drug that had claimed Catherine's life was held to account. Whitaker emerged from the shadows, his innocence affirmed by the weight of irrefutable evidence. Sarah met him once more, their eyes locking in silent understanding. "Why me?" she asked, seeking clarity in the midst of chaos. Whitaker's gaze held a mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "The algorithm chose you, those untainted by our stories, those who still believe in their judgment amidst the lies." In that moment, they stood as witnesses to the fragility of truth, the power of revelation. The VHS tapes, once symbols of mystery, now stood as testaments to resilience and redemption. In the quiet of a suburban neighborhood, a story unfolded, a tale of unexpected allies, hidden truths, and the enduring quest for justice. Story 19. In the hushed stillness of the night, the house sat silent, its windows like vacant eyes watching over the sleepy neighborhood. For years, it had remained untouched by time and human presence. Whispers floated among the neighbors, tales of a young woman who had vanished without a trace, leaving behind an empty space filled with unanswered questions. When the new tenants arrived, drawn by the lure of a quiet abode, they found the bedroom locked tight, secrets sealed within its walls. With cautious curiosity, they forced their way in, breaking the stagnant air that hung heavy with neglect. The room revealed itself like a forgotten memory, frozen in time yet pulsing with an unseen energy. The bed stood neatly made, a ghostly impression of someone's touch. The mirror gleamed, reflecting shadows of the past. And there on the desk, a single candle stood as a sentinel of light in the darkness, its essence extinguished, leaving behind nothing but a pool of hardened wax, a silent witness to the passage of time. A notebook lay open, pages whispering untold stories in the language of ink. Detective Morgan, with a gaze as sharp as a hawk's, delved into its secrets, tracing the delicate script of a young woman named Elise Winters. Her words danced across the pages, a dance of order and precision, until they stumbled upon the final entry, a plea etched with desperation. "I know he's watching me tonight," the words trembled on the page, a chilling echo of fear and defiance. The detective closed the book, a shiver running down his spine, as if he too could feel the presence of unseen eyes in the room. The investigation unfolded like a tapestry of shadows and light, revealing a web of deceit woven by powerful hands. Elise, a paralegal with a keen eye for truth, had stumbled upon a dark secret buried within the depths of corporate greed. Her pursuit of justice had led her into the labyrinth of deception, where the lines between right and wrong blurred like a foggy dream. As the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, a sinister truth emerged from the shadows. Elise's disappearance was no mere vanishing act, it was a calculated move in a deadly game of power and corruption. The room, a silent witness to her struggle, held the key to unlocking the darkness that had consumed her. The truth, like a hidden stream flowing beneath the surface, revealed itself in unexpected moments. A flash drive, a key, a passage concealed behind a wall, each discovery a breadcrumb leading closer to the heart of the mystery. Vincent Harriman, a man of influence and malice, stood at the center of the storm, his hands stained with the blood of innocence. The walls of his fortress crumbled under the weight of justice, revealing the depths of his depravity. In the court of law, the echoes of Elise's voice rang loud and clear, a testament to her unwavering courage in the face of darkness. Harriman's lies crumbled like ash, his facade of innocence shattered by the weight of truth. As the final verdict was delivered, a sense of closure settled over the house, a whisper of peace for the restless soul that had lingered in its shadows. Elise's legacy, a beacon of light in a world of shadows, illuminated the path to justice for those who had been wronged. The house, once a tomb of secrets, stood empty once more, its walls echoing with the echoes of a battle fought and won. The light in the upstairs window flickered like a silent vigil, a reminder of the woman who had dared to challenge the darkness. In the stillness of the night, justice prevailed, a quiet victory for the voice that had been silenced but never forgotten. Elise Winters, a name etched in the annals of history, a symbol of resilience in the face of adversity. And as the stars twinkled overhead, the house embraced the serenity of slumber, its secrets laid to rest at last. Story 20. Renovations always uncover peculiar things. Old newspapers, shattered trinkets, forsaken photographs. Yet when the couple pried up the floorboards, they stumbled upon a folded letter tucked neatly beneath the wood. The paper, fragile and the ink faded, held a cryptic message: "Beware the knocker." Before they could process this eerie find, 3 sharp knocks reverberated through the silent house, sending shivers down their spines. Sarah and Michael had bought the Victorian-era home at an estate sale, enchanted by its intricate moldings and storied past. Little did they anticipate that their renovation project would unearth such unsettling secrets. Detective Alina Reed arrived at the scene with her partner, the exposed floorboards unveiling the dark void below. Her weathered hands, bearing the marks of years spent handling evidence, gingerly retrieved the note with gloved fingers, aware of the unavoidable contamination caused by the couple's touch. Reed scrutinized their faces as they recounted the knocking incident, sensing genuine fear in their eyes. Background checks on Sarah and Michael revealed nothing amiss. They were newlyweds with good credit and stable jobs. However, the house harbored a more intricate history. Previously owned by the Hargrove family for generations, it had sat empty for 2 years after the passing of the last inhabitant, Margaret Hargrove, an elderly widow known for her solitary life. Neighbors described Margaret as reclusive yet amiable, with no known enemies and no suspicious circumstances surrounding her demise deemed natural causes by the coroner. Still, an unsettling air lingered. Forensic analysis dated the note back approximately 2 decades. The handwriting bore signs of distress, hinting at fear or urgency. At that time, Margaret would have been in her 60s, living with her late husband, Franklin. Reed delved deeper, scouring county records and interviewing former acquaintances of the Hargroves. Franklin, a respected retired teacher with a penchant for woodworking, left behind several handcrafted pieces in the house. A former student recalled him as kind but troubled in his final teaching years, plagued by paranoia and the feeling of being watched. A breakthrough occurred during Reed's interview with Margaret's sister, now residing in a nursing home. Despite her fading memory, certain details remained vivid. Margaret feared him towards the end, she whispered. Not Franklin, no, the man who knocked, the collector. Reed pressed for details on the collector. The sister disclosed that Franklin had owed gambling debts to this man who would knock thrice, a chilling warning. Margaret had wanted to sell the house to settle the debts, but Franklin adamantly refused. Returning to the house with a forensic team, Reed ordered a systematic search of the crawl space, leading to a grim discovery. The cadaver dogs unearthed a male skeleton beneath the foundation, wrapped in plastic with a skull fractured in multiple places. Dental records ruled out Franklin Hargrove as he had been cremated. This unidentified individual had never been reported missing. Further excavation exposed a wallet encased in the plastic, revealing the ID of Victor Mercer, a notorious loan shark and gambling collector who disappeared 2 decades prior. The case unraveled through forensic evidence and Margaret's hidden diaries found in the attic. Franklin, burdened by gambling debts and threats against Margaret, had a fatal confrontation with Mercer. The tools of his workshop turned into weapons, and the crawl space became a grim resting place. Margaret, out of fear and loyalty, aided in concealing the crime. Her diary entries depicted the torment she endured, haunted by phantom knocks and an unshakable dread. With Victor Mercer's remains returned to his family, justice, though delayed and cold, was served. Sarah and Michael, unable to bear the weight of the house's dark past, sold the property, leaving the renovations unfinished. Locals whispered of spectral knocks in the dead of night, echoing through the vacant halls. Whether it was mere creaking wood or a darker force at play remained a mystery. The ominous note, a stark warning, remained in evidence storage, a chilling reminder: beware the knocker. Margaret's intentions behind the note, whether directed at Mercer, Franklin, or an unknown entity, were never clarified. Detective Reed reflected in her final report that some mysteries, even when seemingly resolved, retain elusive elements that defy complete understanding. Story 21: The Tale of Twin Shadows. She cleared the mist from the mirror, gazing at her reflection with a sense of unease creeping in. Everything appeared normal: her face, her attire, yet an unsettling feeling lingered. A flicker caught in the corner of her eye, a movement that defied explanation. And when she turned away, her reflection remained fixed, staring back at her with an unblinking gaze. Thus began the enigmatic saga of Rebecca Thorne, sparked by a chilling encounter in her own bathroom. Rebecca resided in a modest apartment nestled within a serene suburban enclave. Known for her methodical nature and reserved demeanor, she led a solitary existence, intertwined with a routine governed by precision. A data analyst by profession, her life revolved around order and predictability. Little did anyone foresee that she would become enmeshed in a perplexing mystery that would bewilder investigators and haunt the community for years to come. The initial signs were subtle. Objects within Rebecca's abode seemed slightly askew, displaced, but not missing. A mug shifted to a different shelf, books rearranged, her toothbrush out of place. Initially brushing off these anomalies as mere lapses in memory induced by her demanding work schedule, she paid them little heed. It wasn't until weeks had passed and the disturbances persisted that Rebecca reached out to the authorities, with Detective Marion Shaw assigned to her case. The detective's initial assessment veered towards mental health concerns rather than criminal activity, as no concrete evidence of foul play surfaced. The reports of minor disruptions in Rebecca's routine were filed away, relegated to the back burner of non-urgent cases. There was nothing tangible, Shaw later recounted, just a sense of unease lingering within the walls of her home. However, the pivotal moment arrived with the incident involving the bathroom mirror. During her subsequent interaction with the police, Rebecca recounted the uncanny experience of her reflection seemingly moving independently, observing her every move. This time, she provided evidence of security camera footage capturing a doppelganger entering her abode while she was already at her workplace across town. As forensic analysts scrutinized the perplexing footage, they unearthed no signs of tampering or digital manipulation. The intruder bore an uncanny resemblance to Rebecca, mimicking her every action with eerie precision. With no foreign DNA discovered at the scene, and neighbors corroborating Rebecca's routine comings and goings, the mystery deepened. Rebecca's journal chronicled a crescendo of disturbances, a gradual escalation of peculiar occurrences. Food vanished from her fridge, mysterious searches appeared on her computer, and unsettling selfies surfaced on her phone, images of her own visage, yet subtly altered, hinting at a malevolent presence lurking within her life. The breakthrough emerged when a pattern in the security footage was unveiled. The doppelganger infiltrated Rebecca's sanctuary only during her absence at specific pre-planned engagements. This revelation hinted at a meticulous observer familiar with her every move, orchestrating a targeted invasion of her existence. A forensic psychologist's analysis hinted at a fixation case, a disturbed individual fixated on emulating Rebecca, with the unsettling aim of potentially supplanting her entirely. This theory gained traction when Rebecca mentioned her former co-worker, Lily Winters, who had exhibited erratic behavior and an unnerving obsession with their similarities. A search of Lily's residence unearthed a chilling revelation, a shrine-like replica of Rebecca's life, meticulously recreated within Lily's abode. Photographs adorned the walls, capturing every facet of Rebecca's daily routine, alongside replicas of her wardrobe and detailed notes cataloging her speech patterns and habits. The most disturbing discovery was a series of videos showcasing Lily's gradual transformation into a mirror image of Rebecca, blurring the boundaries between reality and obsession. As authorities closed in on Lily, she vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void that hinted at a sinister plan in motion. Rebecca was relocated under protective custody, while detectives scoured the country for any trace of Lily's whereabouts. The case took a chilling turn when security footage revealed a figure identical to Rebecca infiltrating her former workplace, assuming her identity with alarming ease. The realization dawned that Lily hadn't fled but had seamlessly assumed Rebecca's persona, blurring the lines between reality and deception. Rebecca, forever changed by the ordeal, embraced a new identity in seclusion, while Detective Shaw, haunted by the enigmatic duality of the two women, pondered the depths of obsession and identity that had entwined their fates. As the case remains unsolved, a lingering sense of unease pervades the narrative, underscoring the fragile nature of identity and the chilling prospect of someone willing to erase themselves to become another. In the quiet moments of reflection, Shaw contemplates the twin shadows cast by Rebecca and Lily, a poignant reminder that beneath the surface lies a realm where shadows merge, identities blur, and the essence of self remains a fragile enigma. Story 22, the worn envelope with its yellowed edges held a fresh stamp as if time had paused just for its journey. The detective, with hands steady and eyes curious, unfolded it delicately. Inside lay a single sheet of paper bearing a message typed in haste, the words dancing unevenly across the page. "I am sorry for what I did." The paper exuded a dampness, carrying a faint scent of iron, a subtle reminder of the past. It wasn't until Detective Sarah Morgan detected a reddish smear at the bottom edge that the air in the room grew heavy. The stain, not of ink but of human blood, confirmed what her instincts had whispered. With practiced precision, she secured the letter in an evidence bag, her gloved fingers preserving the silent message within. The forensics team's findings aligned with her suspicions. The blood matched DNA from an unsolved homicide that had lingered like a shadow over the department for years. The victim, a young journalist named Rebecca Warren, had met a tragic end in her own home, stabbed multiple times, her investigative spirit silenced. Her missing laptop, scattered notes, and the air of unfinished stories painted a chilling picture. The arrival of this letter, addressed simply to Homicide Division, breathed new life into a case long thought dormant. The fingerprints on the paper and envelope were scarce, hinting that the sender had taken care to leave no trace. But the postmark whispered a location, a clue waiting to be deciphered. Gathering her team in the dimly lit briefing room, Morgan's gaze met the eyes of her fellow detectives, each face a reflection of determination and anticipation. The walls, adorned with the ghosts of past investigations, watched silently as she affixed the image of the letter at the heart of their pursuit. "This changes everything," she murmured, the words hanging in the air like a promise of revelations to come. Detective James Chen, a steadfast companion in the hunt for truth, offered a different perspective. "Or perhaps it's a game," he mused, his voice tinged with caution. "A performance orchestrated to captivate our attention." The trail led them to a vintage typewriter, its intricate patterns echoing a bygone era, a relic not easily found, but not impossible for those determined to unearth secrets. Their inquiries stretched far and wide, reaching out to collectors and antique havens in search of the elusive machine. As the threads of the investigation intertwined, they delved deeper into Rebecca's world. Her pursuit of justice, her dedication to uncovering the veils of deception, painted a portrait of a relentless soul. An assignment entwined with a wealthy family's dark secrets emerged as a focal point. The tendrils of greed and power, woven into the fabric of their lives, cast shadows of doubt on those closest to Rebecca. Michael Barnes, Rebecca's once devastated boyfriend turned hesitant witness, now found himself under the microscope. The subtle shifts in his demeanor, the unspoken truths hanging in the air, spoke volumes. She feared she was being watched. His words lingered in the room, heavy with regret. I dismissed her concerns, blinded by my own disbelief. While the team pursued this fragile lead, a second letter arrived, echoing the first in its essence of remorse and revelation. The ink, now a deep crimson, bore witness to secrets long buried. She uncovered truths that threatened the fragile balance of power, the message whispered, a confession veiled in shadows. The path twisted towards the mansion of the deceased patriarch, a house haunted by echoes of the past. Richard, the eldest son, stood amidst his collection of antiquities, a facade of innocence slipping with each passing question. The game of cat and mouse reached its crescendo when Alina, the youngest daughter, unveiled a thread linking Richard to the damning letters. A hidden chamber veiled behind the elegance of the mansion revealed a trove of damning evidence. Newspaper clippings, surveillance whispers, and the vintage typewriter, a silent witness to unspeakable truths. The blood, a macabre signature left behind, tied the threads of fate together. The revelation of financial transactions between Richard and Michael unveiled a sinister alliance, a pact sealed in shadows. Michael's confession, a shattered reflection of a man drowning in remorse, unveiled a truth too bitter to swallow. "I never intended for her to meet such a fate," his words hung in the air, a requiem for lost innocence. Aliner's recording, a whisper captured in time, laid bare the web of deceit that ensnared them all. Richard's protestations of innocence crumbled under the weight of evidence, his facade of righteousness shattered by the truth. The courtroom, a stage for justice's final act, bore witness to the unraveling of a dark tapestry. The jury's swift judgment, a verdict forged in the crucible of truth, sealed Richard's fate. As he was led away, a specter of his own making, Detective Morgan approached Rebecca's grieving parents. No words could heal the wounds left by loss, but the closure brought by justice was a balm to their shattered hearts. The blood-stained letters, silent witnesses to a tale of betrayal and remorse, found their resting place in the archives of memory, a reminder that even the most carefully spun webs of deception can unravel with a single thread of truth. And in the stillness of the night, as the world slumbers in peace, the echoes of Rebecca's story linger, a cautionary whisper against the darkness that dwells within. Story 23. She glided in through the front door, dust dancing in the stagnant air. The house had slumbered for years, its walls shedding memories, its furniture veiled in silence. Each step she took felt like tiptoeing through a snapshot frozen in time except for one peculiar detail. The doors, every door she opened led her back to the same room. No matter the path she chose, no matter the handle she grasped, she always found herself back in the parlor. The only escape was the way she had entered. Yet when she turned around, the front door had vanished into thin air. The unearthing of Morgan Pierce's body metamorphosed the deserted Victorian from a mere local curiosity into a chilling crime scene. Detective Sarah Lind lingered at the threshold, observing forensic technicians glide through the dimness like phantoms. The house had garnered a certain infamy among the townsfolk, the house where compasses danced erratically, where whispers of unseen watchers lingered. Now it cradled secrets far graver than mere urban myths. The preliminary examination suggests she passed on roughly 3 days ago, murmured the medical examiner, his voice a mere breath in the heavy quiet. The cause of her demise seems to be asphyxiation. Morgan had been discovered perched in an ancient chair in the parlor, arranged to face the entryway as though awaiting a visitor. Her countenance serene, hands folded neatly in her lap, no traces of a struggle, no marks of defense. The scene exuded a haunting stillness that even seasoned investigators found disquieting. "Who stumbled upon the body?" Lind inquired, scanning her notes. "A real estate agent showing the property to potential buyers," her partner replied. They entered, caught sight of her seated there, mistaking her for a trespasser until they drew closer. The house had remained uninhabited since the passing of its prior owner, Aliner Blackwood, nearly 5 years earlier. Family disputes had ensnared the property in legal limbo, unwanted, unsold, and largely forgotten except by vandals and thrill-seekers. Morgan Pierce, a 26-year-old graduate student delving into architectural oddities for her thesis, had a fascination with spaces that defied traditional norms. The abandoned Victorian, with its reputation for ensnaring visitors, must have beckoned to her like a siren's call. Her roommate reported her missing 2 days ago, Lind remarked. Morgan had mentioned visiting the house where people get lost for her research. As the investigation unfurled, it unveiled Morgan's multiple visits to the house in the days leading up to her demise. Her journal entries chronicled peculiar acoustics, unexpected chills, and doors that seemed to usher her into disparate chambers each time she ventured through. In her final entry, she inscribed her intent to bring specialized equipment to chronicle what she dubbed spatial inconsistencies. Yet that equipment remained elusive. The post-mortem examination unraveled an unexpected revelation: traces of a rare alkaloid in Morgan's system, derived from a plant employed in certain shamanic practices. The substance was notorious for inducing disorientation and vivid hallucinations, yet not in doses lethal enough to claim a life. She wasn't one to dabble in recreational substances, attested her boyfriend during questioning. Morgan was meticulous in her research practices. She wouldn't have jeopardized her perceptions intentionally. Digital forensics exhumed fragments of erased messages from Morgan's phone, dialogues with an individual who shared her intrigue with the house, someone who professed to grasp its enigmas. The exchanges grew progressively intimate and enigmatic. The house retains the echoes of its past, a message disclosed. It yearns for someone to acknowledge it. The investigation led Lind and her team to Adam Reeves, an architectural historian who had corresponded with Morgan. His expertise in rare spatial phenomena captivated her, propelling their professional bond into something more intimate. When questioned, Reeves seemed authentically shattered by her passing. "The house bears a reputation," he articulated. "The original architect wove optical illusions and deceptive perspectives into its design. He fashioned it to confound and disorient." Morgan sensed something deeper, something transcending mere trickery. However, Reeves possessed an alibi for the estimated time of Morgan's demise. Surveillance footage depicted him delivering a lecture at a university symposium hours away. A breakthrough materialized from an unexpected source: Eleanor Blackwood's grandson, now residing abroad. Contacted by the investigators, he unveiled a family secret shrouded for generations. "My grandmother wasn't the sole Blackwood to perish in that house," he divulged. "There were others, always discovered in the parlor, always appearing tranquil. The family named it the Claiming." He furnished the detectives with journals spanning decades, chronicling deaths initially attributed to cardiac arrest or stroke. A pattern emerged: individuals who lingered within the house ultimately succumbed to what the family euphemistically termed the influence. A secondary scouring of the property unveiled a concealed compartment behind the parlor hearth. Within, Morgan's missing equipment was recovered alongside a startling revelation: an alcove harboring relics from diverse indigenous cultures, arranged in a meticulous geometric configuration. At its core sat a hewn figurine, its features smoothed by generations of handling. Analysis identified the figurine as embodying a deity associated with liminal realms, thresholds between worlds. Residues on the artifacts matched the alkaloid detected in Morgan's system. The case evolved with the forensic scrutiny of dust patterns in the house, indicating a presence beyond Morgan during her final hours. Partial fingerprints incongruous with Morgan's or any recognized visitors were unearthed from doorknobs throughout the residence. 3 weeks into the inquiry, Adam Reeves was discovered lifeless in his abode. Mirroring Morgan's posture, he gazed towards the entrance, countenance serene, with the same alkaloid coursing through his veins. Clutched within his grasp was a key alien to any lock in his dwelling, yet a perfect fit for the concealed compartment in the Victorian. In his parting email, addressed to himself as if safeguarding a testament, Reeves inscribed, "The house doesn't ensnare you physically, it ensnares your perception." Morgan was correct, the doors lead where they always have, yet something compels you to believe you tread in circles. Once you grasp the verity, you can depart at will, yet by then, departure holds no allure. The case endures as an enigma, categorized as suspicious fatalities under scrutiny. The Victorian has since been condemned, its access cordoned off by authorities. Nonetheless, whispers persist of spectral lights glimpsed within on certain evenings, and of visitors who step inside only to vanish from sight. Some locals attest the house seizes those who fathom its mysteries too keenly. Others posit that Morgan and Reeves unearthed something potent and age-old, something existing in the interstices of conventional reality. The truth lingers as elusive as an exit in a house where every door guides back to the inception. Story 24. The real estate listing made no mention of a basement. The blueprints revealed nothing about its existence. Yet when the family peeled back the old carpet, a hidden door emerged. A hefty, rusted handle clung to the door. It took the strength of 3 to pry it open. Stale air crept out, heavy with the scent of damp earth. Steps descended into the shadows below. They anticipated storage space, but instead found a solitary chair beneath a swaying light bulb. And on the wall behind the chair, a series of photographs of them. The Mercer family had settled into the suburban home amidst the winter's early darkness, surrounded by barren trees and a cold, empty sky. They admired the 2-story structure with its worn siding and creaking floors, believing it held character and history. Little did they realize the depth of history within the house and how violently it would collide with their present. Detective Sarah Connors arrived at the property with her partner, the crime scene secured with fluttering yellow tape. Mrs. Mercer's voice trembled as she recounted what lay hidden beneath their living room floor. Connors directed the forensic team to document everything before further exploration. Camera flashes illuminated the stairwell as they delved into the basement's depths. The small basement resembled a standard bedroom, with concrete walls painted a dull gray. A lone chair sat bolted to the floor under the harsh glare of the bare bulb, but it was the row of photographs that captivated them. 37 images arranged meticulously in chronological order. These go back nearly 4 weeks, noted Connor's partner, inspecting time-stamped prints. The investigation unveiled no signs of forced entry or theft. Only a profound invasion of privacy that shattered the family's sense of security. Forensics uncovered multiple fingerprints, mostly from past homeowners. The property had changed hands 6 times in a decade, each family departing within a year, often selling at reduced prices. None had ever mentioned a basement. As they delved deeper, the case grew more disturbing, unveiling a history of altered blueprints, withdrawn permits, and redacted inspection reports. A breakthrough emerged during an interview with the contractor who renovated the house years ago, his face drained of color at the sight of the basement photos. "That room wasn't there," he insisted, hands trembling. "I stripped that place to its foundations. No basement, no door, just earth and concrete." Digital forensics revealed a hidden memory card within the light fixture, containing hundreds more images of the Mercers and prior families. The case took a darker turn, with recovered audio files capturing private conversations throughout the house. Sophisticated microphones were suspected, yet none were found during the initial search. "We must investigate every inch," Connors ordered, urgency lacing her voice. Behind the photo wall, they uncovered a passage leading to a monitoring station, a desk, a chair, a laptop linked to wireless cameras, and a journal detailing intimate observations of each family. The journal's handwriting matched that of the house's builder, Edward Kelvin, who had allegedly died during construction with no public record confirming his passing. The final journal entries grew increasingly erratic, hinting at a sinister presence lurking within the walls. Fingerprint analysis confirmed Kelvin's enduring presence in the house. The manhunt ended with his discovery curled in a crawl space, his body adapted to the narrow passages he had crafted. Kelvin spoke of the families as subjects in his private experiment, detached and clinical in his observations. He saw himself as the house's guardian, the family's mere transitory guests in his permanent domain. The Mercer family never returned, joining the ranks of those who fled, leaving behind possessions to escape the haunting violation. The trial exposed the extent of Kelvin's surveillance network, revealing hidden rooms and observation points meticulously integrated into the house's design. Kelvin remained detached during the verdict, retreating into the recesses of his mind where the house endured as a memory. The property was razed, the earth beneath it disturbed and sealed. Yet for those who resided there, the specter of invasion lingered. They found themselves questioning the emptiness, wondering if they had truly been alone, if the walls had harbored unseen eyes and ears. In quiet moments, they glanced up at vents and fixtures, haunted by the chilling thought of perpetual surveillance. Story 25. It arrived in the mail, wrapped in a plain envelope with no return address. A single brass key worn with time. The homeowner didn't recognize it, but something about it felt familiar. When she slid it into every lock she owned, nothing turned. It wasn't hers. But when she placed it on the coffee table, the old grandfather clock in the hallway let out a single, hollow chime despite having been broken for years. Sarah Miller reported the strange occurrence to authorities after finding the mysterious key. What seemed like an odd mishap soon unraveled into one of the most disturbing criminal investigations the quiet suburban neighborhood had ever witnessed. The responding officer initially dismissed her concerns. A key in the mail, perhaps a mistake, he suggested, but Sarah insisted something felt wrong. The officer reluctantly took the key as evidence, mostly to appease her, placing it in a small evidence bag that would later become central to a sprawling investigation. Detective Robert Harmon received the case file during the morning briefing. A veteran investigator with the Special Victims Unit, he had developed an intuition for cases that would evolve beyond their seemingly innocuous beginnings. The brass key sat on his desk, unremarkable yet somehow unsettling. Background checks revealed Sarah had no criminal history. A retired high school English teacher, widowed, with 2 adult children living across the country. Nothing suspicious in her financial records, phone logs, or social media. She appeared to be exactly what she claimed, an innocent recipient of something strange. The forensic team found no fingerprints on the key besides Sarah's. The envelope yielded nothing except a generic postmark from the regional distribution center. No DNA, no trace evidence. The key itself was a standard Schlage, available at any hardware store, though well worn and at least several years old. The breakthrough came unexpectedly when Detective Harmon decided to run the key's unique bidding pattern through the department database. A cold case from 7 years prior had documented an identical key pattern belonging to a storage unit where investigators had found blood-stained carpet, cutting tools, and photographs of unidentified women. The original investigation had stalled without sufficient evidence to identify a suspect. Harmon pulled the dusty case files. The detective who had worked the case had since retired. The storage unit had been rented under a false identity, paid in cash. Surveillance footage had long been overwritten. The evidence collected had yielded partial DNA samples, but no matches in any criminal database. The photographs recovered from the storage unit showed 5 different women, all appearing unconscious. Only 3 had been identified during the original investigation, all reported missing but never found. Their cases remained open, classified as suspected homicides without bodies. Sarah Miller recognized none of the women when shown the photographs. She grew increasingly anxious as the investigation proceeded, installing new locks and a security system in her home. The question lingered, why had someone sent her this key? Harmon ordered a fresh analysis of the original evidence using newer techniques. The partial DNA sample was expanded and run through genealogical databases. This yielded a distant familial match, a second cousin twice removed from the suspect. Working backward through family trees, investigators narrowed their focus to Harold Jenkins, who had lived 2 streets away from Sarah Miller until moving away approximately 6 years ago. His current whereabouts were unknown. Further investigation revealed Jenkins had been a substitute teacher at the same school where Sarah taught, though they had minimal documented interaction. His employment records showed scattered work history, long unexplained gaps, and frequent relocations. His former residence yielded nothing unusual upon inspection. Neighbors described him as quiet, unremarkable, someone who kept to himself, the common refrain that often follows revelations about predators hiding in plain sight. The big question remained unanswered: why send the key now? Why to Sarah Miller? Harmon theorized it might be a trophy, a warning, or perhaps a macabre invitation. The search for Jenkins intensified. His driver's license hadn't been renewed, no credit card activity, no tax returns. The digital breadcrumbs people typically leave behind were conspicuously absent, suggesting an intentional effort to remain untraceable. The true horror of the case emerged when authorities investigated a small cabin registered to Jenkins' deceased mother. Beneath the weathered wooden floorboards, investigators discovered a concealed room accessible only through a trapdoor. Inside, meticulously organized shelves held dozens of identical brass keys, each with a name and date engraved on a small attached tag. 5 keys corresponded to the women from the photographs. The remaining keys, 27 in total, presented a horrifying implication of additional victims previously unknown to authorities. Buried behind the cabin, forensic teams recovered human remains. The excavation continued for weeks as investigators unearthed multiple bodies in varying states of decomposition. Sarah received round-the-clock protection as the manhunt for Jenkins expanded nationwide. Behavioral analysts suggested the key represented a twisted invitation, Jenkins selecting Sarah as someone to appreciate his work. The press dubbed him the Keymaster, a name that spread rapidly across national headlines. Fear permeated the community as residents questioned how such horror had existed among them undetected. Detection dogs tracked a scent from the cabin into the surrounding wilderness. Search teams combed dense forest areas. Thermal imaging drones scanned terrain too dangerous for ground teams. The manhunt became one of the largest in regional history. A wildlife photographer hiking in remote woods captured an image of someone matching Jenkins' description. The grainy photograph showed a bearded man with hollow eyes carrying a backpack, heading deeper into the wilderness. Authorities closed in on the area, establishing a perimeter. Tactical teams navigated difficult terrain while psychological profilers predicted Jenkins would not surrender. They anticipated he might have prepared for this contingency with hidden supplies and escape routes. The final confrontation occurred when a patrol officer encountered Jenkins attempting to cross a river. Rather than surrender, Jenkins retreated to higher ground, where he barricaded himself in an abandoned fire observation tower. Negotiators attempted communication for hours without response. When tactical teams finally breached the tower, they found Jenkins dead from a self-inflicted wound. Beside his body lay a journal containing detailed accounts of his crimes, alongside a single brass key identical to the one Sarah had received. Inside a waterproof container, investigators discovered additional evidence, including photographs, maps marking burial locations, and personal effects taken from victims, a methodically preserved record of atrocities spanning nearly a decade. The journal's final entry addressed Sarah directly. "You never noticed me, but I noticed everything about you. The key opens nothing because what I wanted to give you cannot be unlocked with metal, only with recognition. Now everyone will remember my name." The subsequent investigation identified 32 victims in total. Families who had spent years wondering about missing loved ones finally received answers, though the closure came with the unbearable weight of confirmed tragedy. Sarah never returned to her home, unable to reconcile the horror that had brushed so close to her ordinary life. The grandfather clock that had mysteriously chimed was examined and found to contain a small wireless receiver Jenkins had been watching, waiting for the moment she received his gift. The case remains one of the most disturbing examples of predatory behavior hiding beneath a veneer of normalcy. Psychological researchers continue studying Jenkins' writings, seeking insights to identify similar offenders before they act. And somewhere in an evidence locker, a collection of brass keys sits in silent testimony to lives cut short, each key opening nothing, yet unlocking a devastating truth about the darkness that sometimes hides behind unremarkable facades. Story 26, The Mysterious Dollhouse. She never enjoyed venturing into the attic, but when a storm caused a leak in the roof, she had no other option. The attic was a realm of forgotten treasures, cloaked in dust and cobwebs. Nestled in the shadowy corner, an old dollhouse rested, eerily intricate, its minuscule furniture meticulously arranged. Yet as she peered inside, a knot twisted in her stomach. The figures within were not mere dolls, they were delicate, hand-carved replicas of her family. Each tiny figure positioned precisely as they sat downstairs, except for one. The figure meant to portray her stood by the attic door. Rebecca Morgan traced her finger along the dollhouse's roof, feeling the indentation where the small wooden figure stood frozen in time. The revelation sent a shiver down her spine, unrelated to the chilly draft whispering through the rafters. This dollhouse had no place here. This wasn't her childhood home, but a rental property her family had recently moved into. The peculiar case began with Rebecca's frantic call to the authorities. Officers arrived at the suburban dwelling to find a family in distress, gathered in the living room, unwilling to return upstairs. The lead investigator, Detective Sarah Harmon, initially brushed off their fears as a possible prank or the product of an imaginative family adjusting to a new abode. "The intricacy of it all struck me," Detective Harmon later reflected in interviews. Each miniature figure captured a unique aspect of each family member: the father's thinning hair, the teenage son's hoodie, even the small birthmark on the mother's hand. The investigation took a turn when forensic teams uncovered fingerprints on the dollhouse that did not match any of the family members. Even more unsettling were the microscopic cameras hidden in the eyes of each miniature figure, all linked to a sophisticated recording system concealed beneath the dollhouse. Analysis of the Morgan family's movements in the days prior unveiled a disquieting pattern. The positions of the figures in the dollhouse not only mirrored where the family had been sitting the evening before, but replicated exact stances from various days, indicating someone had been observing them long enough to learn their routines. We soon realized this wasn't a simple case of stalking, elucidated Detective Harmon. The perpetrator exhibited a level of fixation seldom seen in the annals of criminal psychology. The investigation unearthed a concealed entrance to the basement, camouflaged behind a false wall in the pantry. Inside, investigators stumbled upon a makeshift living quarters, complete with signs of habitation predating the Morgan's occupancy. Discarded food wrappers, water bottles, and a sleeping bag hinted that an intruder had been dwelling beneath the family for weeks. Most perplexing was the absence of forced entry. Property records revealed the house had sat vacant for nearly a year before the Morgans' arrival. The former owners, an elderly couple, had passed away within months of each other. Their son oversaw the estate sale and subsequent rental of the property. Interviews with neighbors provided scant information. While most had observed nothing out of the ordinary, one elderly resident mentioned sporadically seeing lights in the house during its unoccupied period. I assumed it was the real estate folks showing the property, she informed investigators. Never crossed my mind that someone might be living there without permission. A breakthrough emerged through digital forensics. Examination of the surveillance system linked to the miniature cameras unveiled data being transmitted to an external server. The IP address led investigators to a modest apartment across town. Inside, the walls were adorned with photographs of the Morgan family and prior occupants of the house. Detailed journal entries chronicled the daily lives of each family member with unsettling accuracy. Most chilling was the discovery of a workshop housing numerous partially constructed dollhouses, each representing different residences in the vicinity. The apartment belonged to Martin Wells, the son of the former homeowners. Financial records indicated mounting debts following his parents' demise. Rather than selling the house outright, he had fashioned a covert living space, persisting in residing there while collecting rent from unsuspecting tenants. The dollhouse served as his command center, expounded the forensic psychologist assigned to the case. Each figure symbolized someone he observed. The figure of Rebecca by the attic door wasn't a menace, it was his way of acknowledging her unearthing of his surveillance system. During interrogation, Wells remained eerily composed as he elucidated his motives. They were inhabiting my home, sleeping in my parents' room. I needed assurance they were treating it with reverence. When questioned about the positioned figures, he simply stated, I wanted them to understand I was always watching. Psychological evaluation unveiled a convoluted case of possessive delusion. Wells struggled to cope with the loss of his childhood home, fabricating an intricate system to retain dominion over it. The dollhouse became his avenue of possessing both the property and its occupants. The Morgan family never set foot in that house again. Rebecca later recounted that the most haunting moment wasn't discovering the dollhouse, but comprehending its implications. Someone had been observing us all along, measuring our lives, transforming us into playthings. The true terror wasn't the dollhouse itself, it was knowing that in his mind, we were merely puppets to be staged and watched. Wells faced multiple charges, including stalking, invasion of privacy, illegal surveillance, and breaking and entering. The case prompted a reevaluation of real estate disclosure laws concerning deaths on properties and the obligation of agents to ensure homes are properly vacated before new occupants move in. During sentencing, the judge acknowledged the exceptional violation the Morgan family endured. You didn't merely intrude upon their residence, you violated their sense of security and self-governance. You witnessed their most intimate moments and replicated them for your amusement. What alarms criminologists about this case is how long Wells might have remained undetected had Rebecca not stumbled upon the dollhouse. Analysis of his journals suggested he had clandestinely inhabited homes for nearly 2 years, transitioning from one property to another, crafting dollhouses mirroring each observed family. The Morgan family eventually relocated far away, yet Rebecca confessed in her victim impact statement that she still inspects closets and crawl spaces routinely. She rid their new abode of all dollhouses and miniature figurines. "Some days I still feel as though I'm under surveillance," she confessed. "I wonder if somewhere, someone is still manipulating a miniature version of me in a dollhouse I have yet to uncover." Story 27, The Mystery of Whispering Manor. She had a desire to transform the nursery before the baby's arrival, a sanctuary for the little one. The walls wore a faded blue, a color that seemed to hold secrets of bygone days within its paint. As she applied the first layer of fresh white paint, something unexpected emerged from beneath the faint outlines of letters, gradually sharpening into legibility. A message cryptically scrawled beneath the surface. "Don't let it hear you." Her breath hitched in her throat. Stepping back, she noticed them tiny handprints imprinted in the wet paint, positioned too high for any child's reach. The revelation in the nursery of the Morgan residence marked the inception of what would later be known as the Whispering House case. The young couple had acquired the Victorian-style home for a surprisingly low price, unaware of the dark history that shrouded its walls. Detective Sarah Klein, her notebook at the ready, rang the doorbell. A woman answered, her pregnant belly prominent beneath splattered overalls. Weariness shadowed her eyes' rest had eluded her for days. The detective observed the tremble in the woman's hands as she recounted the unsettling discovery of the hidden message and handprints. The previous owners vanished abruptly, the woman shared. Neighbors mentioned their sudden departure in the dead of night, leaving without a trace of a moving truck, just their essentials packed into their car. Upon entering the historic abode, Detective Klein's footsteps echoed against the aged floorboards as she made her way to the nursery. There, she inspected the partially painted wall where the enigmatic message still lingered beneath the unfinished coat. Beside it, 5 small handprints marked the fresh paint, positioned at a height that defied logic. Back at the precinct, Detective Klein delved into the property records. The house had changed hands numerous times over the years, each family residing for a brief period before moving on. What raised more alarm were the reports of child welfare issues filed by 3 of the families. Children spoke of whispers emanating from the walls and unseen eyes watching over them as they slept. Delving further, the detective unearthed the historical ties of the house. Once owned by Eleanor Blackwood, a wealthy widow who ran an orphanage within its walls during the industrial era. Newspaper clippings hinted at the mysterious disappearance of 5 children under her care, presumed to have fled. During renovations after Eleanor's passing, a concealed room was discovered behind the nursery wall. Inside lay remnants of the children's small shoes, toys, and garments, but no bodies. The case faded into obscurity until now. Interviewing former occupants, Detective Klein pieced together a chilling narrative. Each family with children reported strange events, objects moving on their own, echoes of childish laughter in empty rooms, and drawings appearing mysteriously. But it was the hidden messages that truly unnerved them, always surfacing during nursery repaintings. A forensic linguist's analysis linked the writing to Eleanor's own hand. Yet more unsettling were the handprints unchanged in size and placement over the years, despite different children inhabiting the home. The investigation took a macabre turn when the detective gained permission to scan the basement with ground-penetrating radar. Anomalies detected beneath the concrete led to a grim revelation. 5 small shapes, child-sized, lay beneath the surface. Breaking through, workers unearthed a tragic sight: 5 sets of remains arranged in a circle, bearing pendants engraved with the names of the missing orphans. Luminol was sprayed in the nursery, revealing a haunting sight in the darkness: handprints glowing on every surface, unseen to the naked eye. Countless imprints, as if the children had desperately sought escape. Eliner's journals uncovered her twisted belief in harnessing the life force of orphaned children to prolong her own existence. With the burial of the victims, justice was finally served. However, an inexplicable presence lingered within the walls of the house, reaching out through time and layers of paint. The nursery walls, a chilling relic of the past, were eventually demolished during cleanup. Yet workers reported hearing spectral whispers amidst the debris, refusing to return after their shifts. The house stood abandoned, the pregnant couple opting to leave their belongings behind, unable to face the lingering spirits. Detective Klein concluded her report, documenting the eerie handprints illuminated by luminol and the cryptic message hidden beneath layers of paint. Closure was achieved for the victims, but the spiritual enigma of the house endured, a cold case unsolvable by earthly means. One photograph remained with the detective, a haunting image of 5 luminous handprints in the dark, a reminder that some crimes etch impressions that time cannot erase.